Hi, this is Shannon. Please leave a message.
From the moment that I called my daughter and found out that her phone mailbox was full, I knew from that moment that Clay had murdered her.
911, what are you reporting? Hello? What are you reporting?
Mr. Starbuck, did you see Chanin Starbuck on December 1st, 2011?
No.
Mr. Starbuck, did you kill Chanin Starbuck?
No, I did not.
This 911 call made on the morning of December 1st, 2011 by a woman named Chanin Starbuck would soon baffle detectives when they received another 911 call the following day from her ex-husband, Clay Starbuck. It was then that they learned of Chanin's disappearance. Clay dialed 911 and told the dispatcher that Chanin hadn't responded to any of his phone calls or text messages and even failed to pick up their kids from school. This had never happened before, and Clay urged the police to check her house, which had been locked since the previous day. When detectives entered the house, they were shocked by the scene before them. The Starbuck family was equally unprepared for the horrific discoveries the detectives uncovered in the home and the twisted secrets they were about to unravel. Shannon Denise Conway was born on April 19, 1969, in the city of Anderson, Indiana. After graduating in 1987, she attended Florida State University and later Seminole Community College, earning an associate degree in art therapy. In 1989, when she was 20 years old, she met 24-year-old Clay Starbuck. Clay was born on September 1st, 1964, to Larry and Betty Starbuck. When Clay met Shannon, he was divorced with 2 kids, Jesse and Drew. Shannon and Clay, after meeting for a couple of times, instantly clicked and got married on June 1st, 1990. The couple moved to Valdez in Alaska, where Clay worked as a pipeline manager. However, this would often lead to him staying away from his family for weeks before returning home. But Shannon devoted herself to being the best stepmom for his children and loved her husband dearly. Shannon was a full-time house mom, taking care of the children and cooking, while also giving herself time to do other activities such as quilting and sewing. She would also sell her quilts at local craft shops at around $1,000. It was a chilly day on December 1st, 2011. 15-year-old Logan Starbuck had just finished school along with her 2 younger siblings. She sent a message to her mother, Shannon, at 2:45 p.m. asking when she'd be coming by to pick them up. Usually, Shannon arrived at school before or at 3 p.m. and wait for them in the school parking lot, but not that day. 20 minutes passed since Logan had texted her mom when she received a message from Shannon saying, "Dad, I have a headache, stay there." At 3:06 p.m., Logan received another message from her mother that said, "Sent Marsh a note, Dad will be there in 10 minutes. Marsh was the nickname given by the family to the youngest son, Marshall. Logan and her siblings waited for their father to arrive, but there was no sign of him either. Worried, Logan contacted her 21-year-old brother, Austin, who was at work at a local glazing company at the time. She asked him to pick them up since none of the 3 children had a spare key to the house. Austin took them to their father Clay's house, which was half a mile away from Shannon's house. After the divorce, 22-year-old Austin and 19-year-old Blake, the 2 older siblings, lived with their dad, while the 3 younger siblings, Logan, Serena, and 12-year-old Marshall, lived with their mom while paying frequent visits to their dad's house. After the divorce in July of 2011, Shannon and Clay made sure to amicably co-parent their children. Thus, Clay would normally drive the kids to school in the morning, and Shannon would bring them back home in the afternoon. But things were not at all normal on December 1st, 2011. It was freezing cold in Deer Park, Washington that December. Usually, Clay would get up early, turn on the car heater, and drive around for a while before going to pick up the kids so they'd be comfortable. That day, however, his car broke down on High Desert Road, and so he texted Shannon, "Car quit, can you take the kids?" To which Shannon replied with a K and took the kids to school. When the children unexpectedly turned up at his doorstep that afternoon, he asked where Shannon was, since it was her duty to pick up the children as always. Austin told his father that the children called him to pick them up after their mother failed to collect them from school. Shocked, Clay pulled out his phone to check up on Shannon, but realized that his phone had been turned off since the morning, and it was 3:37 p.m. when he finally turned it on. He saw a message from Shannon sent at 3:17 p.m. that said, "I just got up. Can you get the kids?" This text, however, didn't raise any red flags for Clay because Shannon had done this in the past quite a few times. At around 5:45 p.m., Clay texted Shannon, updating her about the basketball match at Deer Park High School and adding that he'd be taking the kids to the basketball game and to let him know when she arrived so he could pay for her ticket. But surprisingly, Shannon didn't show up for her son's basketball match. Concerned, Clay, along with the kids, drove to Shannon's house to check up on her, but when they reached the house, no one opened the door. The rooms and the front porch were dark. After waiting for a few minutes, they went back home. The next day, on December 2nd, 2011, the kids didn't go to school because they had no fresh clothes at their dad's house. Clay decided to keep the kids till he got a response from Shannon, but he was quite agitated about this. Clay texted Shannon in the afternoon, saying that if he didn't get a call by 7 p.m. that evening, he'd call the police. But a 911 call had already been made. Shannon's mother, Melanie, tried calling her daughter several times, but kept getting a message saying that the voicemail was full. Melanie immediately knew that something was wrong. She called Stephen and Amy, Shannon's siblings, but when they told her that they hadn't heard from her either, Melanie immediately called 911 at 5 p.m. and asked police to do a welfare check on Shannon. On December 2nd, 2011, at around 6:15 p.m., two deputies, Jess Shover and Dan Dutton, showed up at Shannon's place after her mother made the 911 call. When they reached the house, the door was locked, no lights were turned on, and there was a package lying on the front porch. The officers knocked on the door and walked the exterior of the house, all while calling Shannon's name, but no one answered. The officers decided to leave after 10 minutes when they found no disturbance in or near the property. When the clock hit 7 p.m. and Clay still hadn't received a text from Shannon, he also dialed 911 to request a welfare check on her. Around this time, the two officers who visited Shannon an hour before went to Clay to ask him about Shannon. He told them that he was already on the phone with the police. He then showed them the voicemails and text messages he'd sent her, adding that he had absolutely no idea where she was. After a bit of questioning, the deputies left, but Clay dialed Deputy Dutton at around 11:45 p.m. to check if they had any news about Shannon. Their answer was negative. At around 8 a.m. on December 3rd, Shannon's longtime friend from high school, Doug Carter, also called 911 because he couldn't get a hold of her. Moreover, Melanie called the officers once again, urging them to go inside the house and check if everything was all right, since it had been 48 hours and Shannon was still nowhere to be found. So the deputies ended up getting Shannon's rented house key from her landlord. At around 9:11 a.m., the officers made their way into Shannon's house. The house was absolutely quiet. Shannon's laptop was on the table in the living room. Nothing seemed to be disturbed or out of place. Everything looked completely normal. When the detectives entered the bedroom, however, they were met with a horrifying scene. In the main bedroom, Shannon's phone was on the bedside table, and on the dresser lay her journal and a bottle of lubricant. The bed was unmade, and the blankets were folded on the floor at the foot of the bed. But the sheets were missing from the bed. There were only a few pillows and a mattress protector with visible bloodstains on them, but it was what lay on the bed that left them speechless. On the bed lay the partially naked body of Shannon. She was lying on her back wearing a robe that was pulled open to expose her chest area. There were many defensive marks, and officers soon realized that this woman was tortured for hours before she succumbed to her injuries. The perpetrator didn't leave her body in the same state as when she died. Instead, her body was posed in a very disturbing manner. Responding officer Mike Ricketts was shocked when he discovered the horrifying ways in which Shannon was tortured and killed. As the investigation proceeded, the detective found a gun safe that was left open. On the shelf inside the safe were condoms and sex toys, but it was clear that these items were intentionally displayed as if to mock Shannon. The detectives concluded that whomever killed Shannon was most likely let inside the house. It appeared the killer's objective was to debase and humiliate her, indicating they harbored a great deal of anger towards her. Upon arrival, the forensic team took latent prints as well as all the potential sources for DNA evidence. They took more than 100 pictures of the crime scene and 12 latent fingerprints from the massager box, the bathroom mirror, the sink, the faucet handle, and a notebook. They collected more from the top of the dryer door, and the interior of the front door. In one of the kids' bedrooms, the detective noticed a handprint on the wall. The bathroom drain, as well as the keyboard and mousepad from Shannon's computer, were also swabbed for any evidence. They collected all the sex toys, a fitted sheet and a towel from the laundry, a washcloth, a blood-soaked mattress protector, and her laptop. The detectives believed she died from strangulation due to the marks on her neck, so they sent her body for an autopsy. Detectives also noted that CCTV footage from the day of the murder was missing. After investigating the crime scene, the detectives believed that Shannon was killed in the main bedroom's attached bathroom right after she got out of the shower and was later dragged to be posed on her bed in the most degrading way. Around noon, Clay arrived at Shannon's house to ask the detectives if they'd found Shannon or any clues to her whereabouts. When the detectives didn't let him inside the house, he got mad and demanded to know what had happened. The detectives told Clay that they needed to ask him a few questions about Shannon's life. Clay told the detectives that after their divorce, Shannon was heavily involved in online dating and that at one point, Clay started to get concerned for her safety. He showed them the 911 call he made on December 2nd when he was agitated after Shannon failed to text him back for hours. The detectives directed Clay to the sheriff's substation in Dare Park where he'd be questioned further. Clay drove to the station and met with Detective Jim Dressbach from the Major Crimes Unit. He sat down in the interrogation room and began to narrate the events that he believed ultimately led to Shannon's dreadful demise. While her family was booming, her marriage, unfortunately, had hit rock bottom. Clay started having an affair with one of his co-workers, and when Shannon found out about this, the couple decided to get a divorce in March of 2000. When Shannon moved to Arizona and settled into her new life, she met a man named Dexter McClary and started dating him. But she soon realized that her heart was still with Clay and she was unable to move on. After a few months, she met with Clay and the couple decided to give their relationship another shot. The promises and compromises worked, and a year later in 2001, Shannon gave birth to another son named Marshall. But Clay started to get suspicious as to whether Marshall was actually his son. He calculated that at the time Shannon got pregnant, she must have been dating Dexter. But he was determined to make this relationship work, just like Shannon, and so the couple decided to get remarried on December 29, 2006. Around May of 2008, the family moved to 509 North Ripper Street in Deer Park City, Washington. Shannon's longtime friend, Doug Carter, and his wife, Janine, had advised the couple to move into this peaceful town where violent crimes were quite rare. Clay continued to work at the pipeline, and the same schedule started to repeat where he'd often stay away from home for weeks. This slowly started to take a toll on their marriage once again, and in July of 2010, the couple separated once again. However, just a few days before the divorce, Clay suffered a severe back injury back in Alaska that ultimately forced him to quit his job. When he lost his job, Clay came back to Deer Park and stayed at 1625 East 2nd Street, which was about half a mile away from Shannon's place. This time, though, Shannon didn't want to get back together with Clay. Instead, she opted to focus more on herself and her kids. She was slowly healing. Clay had his surgery in July, and the same month the couple were divorced. 21-year-old Austin and 17-year-old Blake went to live with their now disabled dad, while the 3 other kids stayed with Shannon. Clay had to pay about $5,000 a month for child support and maintenance. Devoting all her time to her personal growth and her children, Shannon started to explore new things with her newfound freedom. But things weren't easy for Shannon financially. She started working again after 20 years of being a housewife. She also enrolled in a dental hygienist course at the Spokane Community College. She confided in her mother and talked to her daily. One day, Shannon proposed the idea of going back to the dating world and meeting her Mr. Right. Now 42, Chanin made a profile on various dating sites, hoping to find a person she could give all of her love to. She'd met up with a few men, shared her interests, and tried to build a bond with them. But concerns arose on December 1st, 2011, when no one could get in touch with Chanin. As detectives continued with their investigation, Clay was questioned further about what was currently going on in Chanin's life. Clay told the detectives that he only talked to her through text and usually got information about her daily activities from the kids when they visited him during the weekends. He also gave the detectives the name of all the sites where Chanin was actively participating in online dating. He told the detectives he knew about this from the children, as they frequently complained to him about their mother's behavior. They told their father that when they used a common laptop that belonged to Chanin at home, they found naked pictures and videos of Chanin that she'd sent to other men on dating sites. As the interrogation stretched on, Clay kept demanding to know what had happened to his ex-wife. It was then that Detective Dressback finally told Clay that Chanin had passed away. Hearing the news, Clay collapsed on the floor and cried. A few moments later, he walked up to the bathroom and vomited before coming back to the interrogation room. Detective Dressback asked Clay what he thought happened to Chanin, to which Clay replied that he was convinced that Chanin was killed by one of her online suitors. He even advised the detective to look into her laptop and phone and added that Chanin had always been unfaithful. Previously, Clay had found nude pictures of Chanin in their shared computer. Clay continued by saying that once, during Mother's Day, Chanin left the kids at his place to go out on dates. He also told them about his suspicions about Marshall not being his son. Once the interrogation was over, Detective Dressback decided to question the people in Chanin's neighborhood, but unfortunately, none of them had seen anything suspicious or out of the ordinary at the Starbucks house. When Chanin's autopsy report arrived, Dr. Sally Aiken found chest injuries that were caused by a stun gun. Chanin had 10 broken ribs and a crushed larynx. There was severe bruising underneath her arms that the doctor believed was a result of moving her body from the bathroom, where she was killed, to the bedroom. She had multiple fresh wounds that signified Chanin tried her best to fight off her perpetrator. However, there was a huge bruise on her scalp that indicated that she received a heavy blow to her head. The device in Chanin's private parts was first inserted in the back and was reinserted in the front after she passed away, indicating that she'd been abused both before and after her death. Due to her various injuries, the doctor could not accurately estimate the exact time of death, but she deduced that Chanin died either on December 1st or early December 2nd. The cause of death was due to compression on the neck or strangulation. She was believed to have been choked by either a towel or an arm, holding her face down before posing her on her own bed. Chanin, however, did not die immediately. She was alive and struggling for about 2 hours before her lungs filled up with fluid. She sustained about 80 to 90 wounds in total. When her private areas were swabbed, the medical examiner did find male DNA, which became a crucial clue for the investigation. On December 5th, Clay was once again interrogated for about 3 hours. He fully cooperated and told the detectives everything he knew. He gave them his cell phone information, DNA samples, and agreed to have his photos taken. Upon examining his pictures, Clay didn't seem to have any injuries on his body, which got him off the detectives' radar. This was because Chanin had fought with the perpetrator, which would have led to them attaining some sort of cuts and wounds. When the Starbuck family were interviewed, they cooperated as well. When Austin's hands were examined and he was asked about the bruises and cuts on them, he explained to the detectives that he worked at a glass company called GSI Glass, which led him to acquiring these cuts. All her children told the detectives how they feared their mother probably met a predator online, since they'd seen multiple nude pictures and videos of their mother with other men. As the investigation progressed, the detectives started to look at Chanin's cell phone in order to obtain information about her online communications. While searching through the messages, the detectives saw that on December 1st, from around 8:06 a.m. to 8:46 a.m., she was in constant communication with a man named Tom Walker. They'd met over a lunch date 2 weeks prior and were discussing having a dinner date at Tom's house on December 5th. The messages exchanged between the two were quite sexually explicit, and one of them caught the detective's eye. Hours before Shannon died, Tom had requested that Shannon send him a very graphic picture of herself with a sex toy, suggesting she posed in the exact same way as she was later found dead in her room by the detectives. The detectives called Tom in for questioning right away. Tom was a car salesman who had met Shannon 3 weeks before her death. He immediately agreed to meet with the detectives on December 4th. Tom told the detectives that on December 1st, he left from work at around 9:40 a.m. to attend a funeral in Spokane Valley, which was 28 miles from Deer Park. He left the funeral and returned to work at around 11 a.m., and 20 minutes later, he texted Shannon. At 12:10, Shannon told him that she had to stop by the bank and asked if he'd like to meet up for lunch at 1 p.m. However, due to his busy schedule, he declined the offer. That was the last time he talked to her. The detective took his DNA samples and checked his phone records. It was confirmed that he was nowhere near Shannon's house that day. When the detectives rang up his boss to confirm his alibi, his boss confirmed that Tom went to attend the funeral in the morning before working in the office all day. As the detectives fished for more information from Shannon's phone, another man named John Wilson caught their attention. The detectives realized that this man was catfishing. His Facebook profile was that of a doctor from New York City, and he was using a fake profile on the dating site where he'd met Shannon. Upon examining the text, the detectives found that the pair were planning to meet on Thursday, December 1st. John and Shannon met a few months after her divorce, and they soon started a sexual relationship. John had already told Shannon that he was not looking for anything serious, and Shannon, who'd just gotten her divorce and was embracing the freedom, was fine with that. The detectives also found out that John always called Shannon from a public payphone and texted her in the dating profile from a library computer. This suspicious behavior prompted detectives to search for him immediately. They traced one of Shannon's incoming calls to a payphone near a university library. When they checked the CCTV footage, they saw a man leaving the library not long before the call was made and entering a few minutes later after the call was disconnected. When John learned of Shannon's murder, he got a lawyer and refused to meet with the detectives. It was only when the detectives threatened to expose his chats to his family and the rest of the world through the news, along with his CCTV picture, that he agreed to meet with them on December 17th. He said that his real name was John Kenline and he was a high school teacher. He told the detectives that the reason why he didn't want to come forward was because he was married and had been lying to Shannon and telling her that he was single. They'd been having an intimate relationship for months now. As the questioning continued, John said that he'd visited Shannon's house multiple times on December 1st. They had plans to meet in the morning of December 1st, and so he took the day off from work, left his house at around 9 a.m., took his kids to school, and then reached Shannon's house at around 10:30 a.m. He knocked on the door several times, but when no one answered, he tried calling her from a nearby payphone. Then he went back to her house a second time, walked the perimeter, and went to the backyard. He tried to check for any lights or fans running, but the house was quiet with the blinds down. He finally decided to leave for home, but he stopped at Whitworth University to use a public computer and text Shannon to see if everything was okay. After his message was sent at around 12:17 p.m., Shannon replied at around 12:37 p.m., saying she was eating and asked if he stopped by. John told the detectives that he had a sinking feeling that something wasn't right when he saw her text, but it didn't sound like her. John texted her again, asking if she could meet him at around 10:30 p.m., but Shannon refused, saying she had a headache. So John went back home and followed his usual routine. However, after dropping his daughter off for basketball practice at around 8 p.m., he drove back to Shannon's house and arrived at around 10:30 p.m. He knocked on the door once again, but no one replied and the house was in complete darkness. He tried calling her once more from a nearby payphone, but when she didn't answer, John went home. The detectives collected his DNA samples, but due to a lack of evidence, they had to let John go. The detectives wanted to confirm John's alibi. Since Tom's alibi was already confirmed, John's alibi was confirmed by a barista in a Starbucks cafe where John got his usual morning coffee at around 9:50 a.m. John wouldn't have had enough time to kill Shannon, stage the murder, and then drive all the way to his workplace and order a coffee from a nearby Starbucks store. So John was cleared as a suspect. Shannon's two older sons were out picking up their youngest siblings from school at the time she was murdered, so they were also cleared from the suspect list. Feeling trapped, the detectives began going through Shannon's phone records again, and this time they made a shocking discovery. At around 9:18 a.m. on December 1st, Shannon made a 911 call. This was not in her outgoing call list since it was deleted from her device. The detectives contacted the dispatcher and extracted the recording of the call that had gone completely unnoticed till now.
911, what are you reporting? Hello?
The call lasted for only 30 seconds, and the operator couldn't hear anything except a strange sound from a woman before the call was disconnected. The operator tried to call back, but it went straight to voicemail.
Hi, this is Shannon. Please leave a message.
This new information was very crucial since the detectives now knew Shannon's potential time of death. The detectives hypothesized that Shannon was murdered right after she came home after dropping her kids off at school at around 9:18 a.m. So all the messages sent from her phone after that time were not her doing, but her killer's. The detectives also believed that the killer was someone very close to the family or knew the family quite well because when the killer sent messages from her phone, they used a nickname for Marshall, which was only known to the family. When the detectives talked with the dispatcher, they learned that after the first call was made, the dispatcher made a follow-up call, but when that went unanswered, he didn't reach out a second time. According to protocol, a dispatcher needs to make another call if the first call goes unanswered. If the second call does the same, the dispatcher needs to immediately dispatch emergency services to the location.
He heard nothing. He heard a simple hang-up call with no noise in the background.
The detectives realized that this was clearly a case of negligence and not inexperience, since the dispatcher had 17 years of experience working as a 911 operator. As the detectives questioned a number of Shannon's friends, several of them told the detectives that Clay had a very unsettling aura about him and that the couple's relationship had deteriorated to the point that the couple would get into huge arguments. As the detectives revisited Shannon's life after the divorce, they learned that between June and November of 2011, Shannon had filed 4 reports with the sheriff deputies. Shannon didn't feel safe in her own house. She'd often come home to see items inside her house were misplaced or moved. One time, her car windows were also shattered and her barbecue tipped over on her porch. Scared for her and her children's lives, Shannon changed the locks and didn't give a spare key to anyone. The detectives now began to look at the case from a different angle, this time stressing on the deteriorating relationship of Shannon and Clay. They obtained their divorce filings and also found her diary. The degree of dissolution in the couple's marriage also had a restraining order against Clay till August of 2012. A few months before Shannon's murder, the judge told Clay to pay $9,000 for child support and attorney's fees and also awarded Shannon 50% of Clay's pension. When the detectives went over her diary, they found an entry from September 2011 when she wrote that Marshall was upset after spending the day with Clay. He told Shannon that Clay had shown him naked pictures of her that he'd obtained by bugging her computer and told him that she sent these pictures to other men. He also told her he hated her and it was her fault that they were getting a divorce and Clay had to move away from the family. After examining all these clues, the detectives realized that the divorce was not as smooth as Clay described during his interrogation. He told the detectives that everything was completely fine and they got a divorce based on mutual respect for each other. However, this clearly wasn't the case. Thus, detectives started to closely investigate Clay once again, keeping him as their prime suspect. The detectives asked for his cell phone information and began questioning people close to Shannon. They talked with one of Shannon's friends, Christy Levy, who didn't know Clay that well, but related a story to them. On December 4th, she'd gone over to Shannon's house with food for the children. Clay told Christy to follow him upstairs, and there he told her about Shannon's online dating and infidelity, saying her death was not a surprise considering what she was doing. Christy told the detectives that she was taken aback upon hearing this from Clay. Shannon's neighbor, Lana McKay, told the detectives that the evening before Shannon's body was discovered, she met with Clay at a grocery store. He approached her and told her that he believed something had happened to Shannon. Lana found this strange since she never talked to Clay before. Then again, on December 12th, at a school event, Clay approached Lana and talked to her for more than 5 minutes, narrating Shannon's infidelity and her unfaithfulness to him and the family. Shannon's friends, Doug and Janine, visited Clay after Shannon's body was found, and he again invited Doug to the bedroom to talk privately. There, he told Doug about all the affairs Shannon was having and how Clay had tried to even help her. He also told him that Marshall was not his biological son. This whole conversation felt very bizarre to Doug. Finally, the detectives received Clay's phone records that showed his phone was turned off at 8:08 a.m., right after he texted Shannon to take the kids to school, and was later turned on around 3:37 p.m. When the detectives studied his cell phone activities over the past year, they realized that Clay had never once turned off his phone until the day of Shannon's murder. One of Shannon's high school friends named Summers told the detective that Clay once gave a toy to Shannon wrapped inside a gift box with a note saying, "If I can't have you, you can have this." The detectives also found multiple threatening and angry messages from Clay in Shannon's phone where he blamed her for the money he had to pay and demanded to have more time with the younger kids. Months prior to the murder, Clay had tried to portray Shannon as a maniac. Clay even told a doctor in their neighborhood that he had inserted a device in Shannon's laptop to keep track of her activities. The detectives then checked the CCTV footage of the route where Clay's vehicle broke down the day Shannon was murdered, and sure enough, in all the footage reviewed by them, Clay did not appear in one single frame. When the DNA results arrived in late January to early February, they were a match to Clay Starbuck. The detectives now had the full story in front of them. They knew that Clay lied about his car breaking down and asked Shannon to drive the kids to school. When she left, he snuck into her house and was waiting for her to come back home. When Shannon returned home, he attacked her, and in the process, she tried calling 911. However, her feeble attempt was cut short when he strangled her to death. He proceeded to pose her in a sexually suggestive manner, the same way that Tom had asked her to pose, so that he could shift the detective's attention to her online suitors like Tom and John. Then he pretended to be Shannon, messaging people from her phone long after she was dead. When Clay was brought in for questioning this time, he was anxious and visibly shaking. But he continued to deny his involvement in Shannon's murder.
From the moment that I called my daughter and found out that her phone mailbox was full, I knew from that moment that Clay had murdered her.
She was not someone who would just sit back and let someone run her life for her. She was a fighter, and she fought until her last breath.
On February 6th, Clay was arrested for first-degree murder and second-degree burglary. The detectives filed for a search warrant to thoroughly search his house. Upon searching his house, detectives found very suspicious items in his closet, including Shannon's photo ID and a hard disk labeled Shannon's desktop computer. There were also printed papers of Shannon's email exchanges with other men and her death certificate on display on the top shelf of the closet. Clay's case was sent for trial. On February 9th, 2012, Clay Starbuck was charged with 1 count of aggravated first-degree murder and 5 aggravating factors, including the murder being committed during the time of a burglary and violation of Shannon's protective order. He was additionally charged with 1 count of sexually humiliating human remains. Clay was sentenced to life imprisonment.
Mr. Starbuck, did you see Chanin Starbuck on December 1st, 2011?
No.
Mr. Starbuck, did you kill Chanin Starbuck?
No, I did not.
Do you think that Chanin Starbuck's killer was trying to send a message?
I don't know.
Well, can you give us a fair estimation?
I don't know. That would only be assumptions.
Well, let me hear your assumption.
I don't really have one. I haven't given it much thought.
The 5 children of the Starbuck family were in support of their father throughout the trial. They spoke in the courtroom, saying it was their mother who was addicted to seeing men, and despite her promiscuous behavior, Clay always took her in and gave her his love. They claimed the police and the forensic reports were mistaken and that their father could never have killed their mother. They also shared their belief that the real killer was probably one of their mother's online boyfriends. Chanin's family had a different reaction to Clay's arrest. They were happy to see the man behind bars. Chanin's mother, Melanie, told the courtroom how Chanin was paranoid that Clay would hurt her, and in the end, he did end up hurting her daughter, but she was glad Chanin didn't give in to his sick intentions and kept fighting till the end.
You can't love. You use people, manipulate them for your purpose. Is that why you murdered Chanin and you turned the children against my family?
Chanin's funeral was painful for her family and friends. They prayed for her soul to finally rest in peace. Chanin's brother Stephen wanted to take in the younger Starbuck children, but the oldest son, Austin, fought for custody, saying that he wanted to keep the remaining family together. Seeing this, Stephen backed away and the kids all moved in with Austin. They organized fundraisers and rallied support as Austin's low income was not enough to support 5 people. However, another tragedy hit the family on December 18, 2021, when Logan disappeared from Washington after boarding a bus. The family completely broke down when, on February 10, 2022, the news of finding Logan's lifeless body reached the ears of the rest of the children. Logan's body was found in the river. She had taken her own life. This shattered the family as they grieved for their sibling together along with friends and distant family. So now we ask you, do you think immediate actions could have been taken to save Chanin's life if the 911 operator had sent a follow-up team to check on her right after she made the call? Why do you think that, even after the divorce, Clay was jealous and obsessed with Chanin's dating life? Let us know what you think in the comment section below.
What? And we go down?
No, hang tight there. Go ahead and make notifications for major crimes.
Okay. Homicide first or medical?
The Montgomery County Police received a call for a welfare check on 66-year-old Geoffrey Biddle. What they found, however, turned out to be one of the most terrifying discoveries in the officers' careers. While the killer had gone to great lengths to cover their tracks, a single misstep left behind a crucial clue. As investigators delved deeper, shocking secrets began to emerge, where a familiar figure in Biddle's life was caught on camera, linking them to his horrifying death. The revelation was unexpected, exposing a connection no one could have seen coming, but was it actually the truth? Geoffrey Biddle, 66, was the CEO of a company called Payment Solutions based in Gaithersburg, Maryland, which managed credit card donations for nonprofits. On June 23, 2021, his employees received a somewhat concerning email from him about a family emergency, but they went about their workdays as usual. On the next day, their boss Biddle didn't show up to work, and that's when his employees grew suspicious of his whereabouts. They immediately contacted his friend and ex-business partner Stephen Willard to check on him. When Stephen went into his home at Windsor Lane, he noticed some very odd things that were very unlike Biddle. His car was parked in the driveway with a flat tire, and the front door of his house was unlocked, which was very strange to Stephen. Upon entering the residence, Stephen noticed Biddle's wallet and cell phone lying on the kitchen table, but there was no cash or cards present in it, which was again quite out of the ordinary for Biddle. Stephen knew that Biddle always kept around $100 in cash in his wallet and carried his cards with him. Stephen went on to check the rest of the house and calling to him, but there was no sign of Biddle in his home. At this time, Stephen knew something wasn't right with Biddle, and he immediately contacted his employees to inform the police so that they could investigate further. When police reached Biddle's home, there was still no sign of him. The state of Biddle's home was completely normal, and there was no sign of forced entry or burglary. The officers found Biddle's wallet on the kitchen table with cash and cards missing. They went on to search for him through his 2-story home and continued calling for him, but he was nowhere to be seen. They found his clothes around the bathtub, indicating that he was about to wear them, but never got the chance to do so. The fans and lights on his home were on, but there was no sign of Biddle. Where could he have possibly gone? This question bounced around in detectives' minds like a ping-pong ball until one of the officers went into Biddle's basement and discovered the grim reality of Biddle's fate. Geoffrey Biddle was found dead, but what was more shocking to the officer was the crime scene itself. Biddle's blood had been splattered across the whole basement and every little thing present there. There was blood on the table, appliances, wooden blocks, and whatnot. Even his body was drenched in his own blood. His white clothing had turned red with blood. Biddle had been shot 4 times. 2 of the gunshot wounds were in Biddle's back and upper right chest, but these wounds were not immediately fatal. The other 2 shots were to his head and cheek, which likely came after the 2 body shots. The cause of his death was determined to be the gunshot to his left temple, which was found to be shot from a close range.
I think for all of us, it's just sort of a shock. I mean, our neighbor was, murdered into this home while we were all here. And while we all keep an eye out for each other, nobody saw anything, nobody heard anything. And so it's really disturbing.
Officers found no signs of a struggle. Investigators also discovered emptied .22 caliber shell casings at the crime scene. Biddle's death was ruled to be a homicide. The autopsy also revealed that Biddle had actually been dead since June 23rd, but he lived alone, which is why it took a whole day to discover him. Now the detectives had to kick their investigations into high gear, as the killer could potentially be roaming free, posing a threat to others, or attempting to flee. Without wasting a single second, detectives began interviewing Geoffrey Biddle's employees, as they were the ones who knew him best. One of his employees had dinner with him on June 22, 2021. This was the last time he was seen. His last activity on WhatsApp was also on the same day. The employees told the officers that they did have some information related to Biddle, which was quite odd to them. They revealed that on the day of his murder, Biddle had sent an email informing them that he would not be coming into the office because of some family emergency. This may not have normally set off any red flags for his employees, but Biddle had already told them he'd not be coming into work that day because he had other plans, so why would he send a separate email explaining his absence again? Biddle was supposed to go on a date on June 23, 2021, the day of his murder, and had already informed his employees about this. Biddle and his date planned to meet some of his friends and had tickets to ride the Ferris wheel at National Harbor outside of Washington. The employees stated Biddle knew that everyone in the office was aware of his plan for the day and that he'd not be attending work that day. So why would he send a separate email informing them again that he'd not be coming in that day? Biddle only had one daughter, Elizabeth, 34, and she confirmed that there was no such emergency on that day. As detectives dug deeper, they found that Biddle never showed up for his date. This was later confirmed by the woman he was supposed to meet. While looking for information about his whereabouts on the day of his murder, investigators got their hands on a crucial piece of evidence. As they checked Biddle's cell phone records, they noticed some unusual activity in his call logs. There was a call made to the SunTrust Bank at 7:58 a.m. on the morning of his murder from Biddle's phone. However, Biddle hadn't contacted the bank since 2018. So why did he suddenly decide to call the bank on the day of his murder? He had even visited the bank's website at around 7 a.m. One by one, things started to fall into place. One of Biddle's employees had access to his bank account and notified the detectives about some suspicious transactions from his account. Biddle had signed 3 checks to a 34-year-old man named Billy Phillip, who was cashing the checks for money. 2 checks were cashed on June 23rd, the day of Biddle's fatal shooting, and another on June 25th. The checks cashed on June 23rd were worth $9,500 and $4,500 respectively, and were dated June 17th, June 18th, and June 20th, 2021. Biddle had cashed a total of $18,050 from Biddle's account. As the investigation went on, detectives came across another shocking revelation that this man, Billy Phillip, was an ex-employee of Biddle's payment company. He was, in fact, terminated from the company in July 2020 for committing fraud, as well as a lack of performance. Biddle's then business partner, Stephen, stated that Phillip had stolen checks from the company and cashed them at a Federal Navy credit union, leading the company to fire him. Biddle knew Phillip from having worked for his company, but they were never really close. So, if Phillip was terminated from the company, then why did Biddle sign checks of such large amounts for his former employee whom he'd fired for committing fraud? This piece of information just didn't sit right with the detectives. As they went ahead with their investigation, they discovered that Biddle had never really signed any checks to Phillip. When those cashed checks were thoroughly investigated, it turned out that it was not actually Biddle's handwriting on the checks, but Phillip's. The B in Biddle signed on the checks and the B in Billy Phillip signed on the back of the checks were almost identical. This finding led officers to determine that they were actually forged by Phillip. When officers investigated the footage from the bank, they found that, while cashing the checks, Phillip was very calm and composed and was not fidgety or nervous at any point. Another clue that linked Phillip to Biddle's death was his Google search history that read, "Can bottle work as silencer? Will tape on muzzle brake help with noise? Will ear ringing from gunshot go away? And will Face ID work with eyes closed?" He also searched about the loudness of gunshots for certain weapons. He was not only ready to threaten Biddle with the gun, but was also prepared to use it. This clearly indicated that Phillip had some sinister plans. Even 2 days before the murder, Phillip had researched for Biddle's license plate number and known addresses. Now the police had their person of interest, but they still had to gather some solid evidence linking him to Biddle's death. That's when investigators looked into Billy Phillip's past criminal records, which were telling. In 2008, Phillip had already robbed a Virginia bank, but he was caught and sentenced to 7 years. After he was released, he entered the IT field, and that's how he ended up in Biddle's company as a consultant. However, despite serving time in prison, his fraudulent behavior did not change. Even in Biddle's company, he tried to commit fraud, and he was terminated from there around July 2020. Now, again being fired from a job in April 2021, Phillip was in financial despair, and that's when he targeted someone he knew had money. Phillip was very aware of the financial status of his former boss, Geoffrey Biddle, and even about his daily routine. Phillip knew when Biddle would have been at home and when he was at the office. He'd gained all of this information while working for Biddle and exploited it to execute the almost perfect crime. But little did he know that someone had kept a keen eye on him and his world was about to come crashing down. This someone was none other than the CCTV camera of Biddle's neighbors. In the footage obtained by investigators, Phillip was clearly captured around Biddle's home around the same time as the murder. His car was captured at 7 a.m. on the morning of June 23rd. Later on, he'd been captured walking towards his car in a very calm and composed manner, as if nothing had happened. He casually walked towards his white BMW A3 vehicle and drove away at 9:20 a.m. Phillip didn't even own this car. It was registered in his girlfriend's father's name. This CCTV footage was proven to be a crucial piece of evidence for the investigators, and now they were positive they had their man. They'd even collected a .22 caliber handgun from Phillip's girlfriend's home, which was the same kind of firearm used to kill Biddle. Though they didn't share the same addresses, Phillip used to stay at her home from time to time. Now, with all the evidence collected and footage obtained from CCTV, detectives had enough to make an arrest. Billy Phillip was arrested on June 29, 2021 at his home on Key West Avenue. Investigators found Biddle's cards and checkbook in Phillip's car. He was charged with the first-degree murder of Geoffrey Biddle and quickly found himself in the interrogation room. However, during questioning, Phillip denied any of his involvement in Biddle's murder.
I do, and that was, I didn't do anything.
Well, I'm going to stop you there.
When the detective asked him what he did to Geoffrey Biddle, he said he didn't know anything about the murder, but he did admit to robbing him.
Who's Jeff Biddle?
The guy I used to work for.
You ever cash any of his checks?
I have.
Have you ever forged any checks from Jeff to yourself?
Twice.
Okay, when was that?
I don't even know when that was.
What do you mean I know when that was?
It was recently.
How recent?
Last week.
Okay. Where did you get those checks?
What, Jeff's checks?
Mm-hmm.
It's just where I'm real scared right this second.
Okay.
However, the investigator was not going to let Philip slide. He then presented Philip with the most concrete evidence they had, CCTV footage from outside Biddle's home. The footage clearly captured Philip, along with the vehicle he used to drive, leaving no room for denial.
But at 7:02 a.m., this car goes by Jeff's house. So this camera is the corner house, which is the one next to Jeff's.
Okay.
So this is Jeff's street. Okay? So right around the same time that SunTrust website, accesses this car, which right now, I can't see the tag on this, okay? But that's your car. I know it's your car. Going by. Then, that email sent at 9:07. All right? No other emails or any text messages go out from Jeff's phone. $9:20 in the morning. It's a bad picture because it's a still shot I took from a video, okay? But this is you walking away from his house. And when we get your cell phone records back, I know exactly what they're going to say.
After the detective showed him the CCTV footage of him captured outside Biddle's home, his reactions immediately changed. He grew nervous and started breathing heavily. His anxiety was evident on his face clearly. By this time, Philip knew he could not get away with it, and he finally broke. He admitted that he was indeed present at Biddle's home, and certainly no one else was with him. But he was still adamant that he did not kill Biddle, and that he had not shot himself either.
There's no question that you did this. There isn't, or that you were there.
I was there, but I didn't kill him.
So what happened? If you were there but you didn't kill him, what happened?
And this is the part that just...
So that's you on video. What happened? Was somebody else with you?
No.
Okay. Did he shoot himself?
No.
Okay. I know he didn't shoot himself because of where he was shot and how many times he was shot.
Philip agreed that he knew Biddle was going to be there, but he went into his home anyway.
So you knew he was going to be there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how did you end up there at 7 o'clock in the morning? Why did you go there? I mean, this is it, Billy.
However, upon being asked if he went in there to kill him, Philip vehemently denied it.
Maybe there just isn't a reason. Maybe that's why you can't tell me anything. Because maybe you did just go there to kill him because you were mad at him. Is that not what happened?
No, that's not what happened, Pete.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, Pete. Call me Pete. That's my name. Okay?
When the officer asked him if he shot Biddle in panic or for some other reason, Philip denied shooting him once again.
Maybe you're like, this guy knows me. Like, I don't want to go back to prison. And it just went south. And you shot him once. And then you're like, well, I got to kill him now.
I don't even have a gun.
Then how are you there and he ends up shot 4 times? Maybe he had the gun.
He claimed that he had an explanation that he did not commit the murder, but no one was going to believe him, and he would be labeled as a monster.
And legitimately, I have an explanation.
Okay.
It's not great. It's still bad. Okay?
Well, then what you need to do is trust yourself. You don't need to worry about trusting me. Okay?
But you're asking me, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And every single time, hell, even Willard told me, to not say anything and ask for an attorney. But I've always felt that just talking to somebody, being upfront is always the better option. But
well, Billy, the thing is, man, is like...
And I don't want to be labeled as a monster because I'm not a monster.
So that's what I'm telling you, bro.
But they're already labeling me a monster.
Nobody's labeled you anything. Okay? It's just me and you here. Okay? Nobody knows you're here except for me and the guy that I work with. And, you know?
My fiance and my son, though.
Well, there's nothing we can do about that, okay?
No, but...
Except put the right picture out there. Don't put the monster picture out there. That's not what it is. Let's put the right picture out there.
But see, you're not gonna believe it, you're not gonna believe it. I don't have a gun. I'm sorry, I just don't have one. Okay? Now, how I came into the checks was the same day. Okay?
Philip admitted to robbing Biddle and entering his home without permission. However, even under immense pressure, he denied killing Biddle and refused to reveal any information related to the murder or how it was committed.
I didn't kill anybody, Pete.
So what happened? You said you got there before 8 o'clock. How did you get in the house?
Through the front door.
Was it locked or unlocked?
It was unlocked.
You rang the doorbell?
I knocked on the door a few times.
The front door?
Yes.
Alright, so then what happened? How many times you knocked on the door?
Twice with my standard knock I do.
Okay. Did Jeff come to the door?
No.
So did you let yourself in?
I went and smoked a cigarette first. Thinking maybe he was just in the bathroom or he was running late. Can I please talk to my fiance?
You'll have a chance to talk to her. Okay? But I can't let you talk to her yet. Okay? You'll get a chance. I want you to be able to talk to her. You know? But I can't have you talk to her yet.
Why not?
Because I can't. You know, we gotta finish what we have to do here. And then you'll have an opportunity. She still has her phone. We didn't take it. We left it with her. You know, we don't want to leave her with a newborn baby and their phone.
Where's my son?
His mom's coming to get him.
Why would you take her phone?
We didn't take her phone. That's what I'm trying to tell you. She has her phone.
I don't even have the number.
Well, I'll make sure you have it before we leave here. So you got there before 8. You knocked on the door. No answer. You went and smoked a cigarette. What happened next?
Pete, what I did was wrong, but I didn't kill him. Okay? I did not kill anybody.
So what happened? How did you get into the house? You said the front door, it was unlocked. So you let yourself into the house.
I can't do it.
Billy Phillip never revealed what actually happened on June 23, 2021 at Geoffrey Biddle's home, nor did he give his explanation. Still, the detectives had their theory about the 2-hour window in which the crime happened. They speculated that Phillip was in financial despair, and having worked for Biddle in the past, he knew that he had a pretty penny. He was already familiar with Biddle's schedule and went into his home in hopes that he could steal some cash and checks and then cash them by forging Biddle's signature or perhaps making Biddle sign them himself. He reached the 4604 block of Windsor Lane at around 7 a.m. and disabled Biddle's car to prevent him from trying to escape. Phillip likely entered the house either through an unlocked front door or by being recognized and led in by Biddle, his former employer. If Phillip entered without Biddle's knowledge, he must have bumped into him accidentally. Alternatively, if Biddle let him in, Phillip could have held him hostage at gunpoint. Under any circumstances, Phillip likely led Biddle to his wallet, checkbook, and cell phone. Phillip then forced Biddle to visit SunTrust Bank's website, get the customer care number from there, and forcefully made Biddle call the bank at 7:58 a.m. to check his account balance. Detectives believed that there was a high possibility that Biddle was still alive at the time of the call, as one would have required particular information to make inquiries about his account, and for that, Biddle had to be alive. However, it was never been clear who actually spoke during the phone call. Philip must have impersonated Biddle or threatened him to talk. After that, he took Biddle into his basement, likely by gunpoint, knowing the gunshots wouldn't be heard from there. Once in the basement, he shot him. Then, in an effort to conceal his crime, he sent an email to Biddle's employees at 9:07 a.m. so that they'd not grow suspicious of Biddle's not showing up to work. However, little did he know that this email was going to change the whole case against him. Then he casually left the home with the cash, cards, and checks and drove away by 9:20 a.m. Officers believe that Philip spent an ample amount of time at Biddle's home before leaving there. On February 24, 2023, 38-year-old Billy Phillip pled guilty to first-degree murder, home invasion, armed robbery, and use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. He had already been in custody for 2 years by that time. On May 2, 2023, Philip was sentenced to life in prison plus 65 years in jail after finally admitting to the killing. According to court documents, Philip had stolen a total of $18,144 from Geoffrey Biddle, including cashed money from his checks and $100 from his wallet. Despite admitting to his crimes, Philip never revealed what exactly happened in that basement on June 23, 2021. The world may never know what exactly happened on that day, as only 2 people really know. One of them is not with us anymore, and the other has chosen to remain quiet. Despite this, Geoffrey Biddle is deeply missed by his neighbors, employees, and especially his daughter. She finds comforts in the lilies he planted for her, recalling how her father used to call her often and express his love. Though Geoffrey Biddle is no longer with us, he'll forever remain in the thoughts of those who loved him. May his soul rest in peace. What do you think about this case? What do you think could have possibly happened at Biddle's home on that day? And what was the reason for Philip not revealing the details of the murder? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below.
Right now, there is an active search for a prisoner who escaped Chester County Prison.
People in Chester County are asked to remain vigilant as authorities believe an escaped murderer is still in the area.
Chopper 6 is live over Chester County, where the search for escaped prisoner Danillo Cavalcante has intensified in just the last several minutes.
We will eventually capture him, and when we do, he's going to prison.
On August 31st, 2023, the news of an escaped criminal from the Chester County Jail caused panic among the people of Pennsylvania. The whole of Chester County was on high alert, and a manhunt was initiated immediately with a huge number of police and army forces. This escaped prisoner was 34-year-old Danillo Cavalcante, who cleverly tricked the prison guards of the Chester County Jail and escaped from one of the chimneys by crawling up the wall. The news of his escape was broadcast in every news channel, and a curfew was set for the people of the community while the search was ongoing. This kept everyone on edge as new and surprising news about the dangerous escaped criminal was shared every other day. Who was Danillo Cavalcante, and why was he in jail in the first place? Were the officers successful in catching the fugitive, or did he escape capture by laying down a perfect plan? On July 3, 1989, a child named Danilo Souza Cavalcante was born in Estreito, Maranhão in Brazil. Rather than having a normal childhood, Danilo grew up in the streets as his neighborhood was known for its low living standards, poverty, and unemployment. As a result of this, street and petty crimes were rampant. People would often live by any means they could, and as a small child who only saw violence as a means to an end, Danilo had already started to thrive in such a harsh environment. This marked the beginning of Danilo's criminal history. It was 2019 when Deborah Brandow had decided to come live with her sister when her marriage didn't work out. She didn't want to compromise when it came to her children's well-being and let the divorce affect their development, and so they'd moved from Brazil to Pennsylvania. Sarah Brandow, Deborah's sister, was excitedly making arrangements for her little sister and her nephew Ian and niece Yasmin's arrival. The family didn't have any problem settling down, and the kids loved the city hustle and the improved standard of living. Everything was going great for the two sisters, but an unexpected meeting would forever change their happy lives. In 2020, Deborah was in a park with her kids since it was a holiday when she came across the 31-year-old Danillo Cavalcante. This encounter soon turned into attraction, and Deborah would go on dates with Danillo frequently. He always treated her with respect, paid attention to details, and was kind to all of them. She fell in love and decided to move in together with him. Soon, however, the hyper and risk-taking Danillo started to get bored of the perfect family lifestyle. He started to become extremely jealous and obsessive over Deborah. Danillo had begun to shout at her, venting out his hidden restlessness and anger, and tried to assert total control over her life. Danillo used to get drunk every night and come home a completely different person. He'd verbally hurl insults at her, demanding complete submission, and if she resisted, he'd resort to violence right in front of her children. But Deborah wasn't ready to jeopardize her children's safety, and thus, when Danillo wouldn't listen to her at all, she returned back to her sister Sarah's house. Danillo, however, kept sending her texts and voice messages filled with threats that prompted Deborah to finally go to the police and then to court to file an order of protection prohibiting Danillo from approaching her or her children. But this didn't stop Danillo. He started stalking the woman and even sent text messages where he promised to resort to violence if she didn't come back to him. These messages alarmed Deborah and led her to conduct a small investigation herself in order to dig up information regarding who Danillo really was, since she knew almost nothing about him. Deborah contacted acquaintances in Brazil through social media and found out information regarding his former life in the country and his reasons for entering the United States. She felt uncomfortable and shocked after learning the details. On November 5, 2017, while still living in Brazil, Danillo had wounded 20-year-old student Walter Junior Moreira dos Reis, shooting him 5 times near a restaurant. During the investigation, it was revealed that the two were friends and the feud had arisen over Walter's car repair debt. A week after the crime, the Brazilian judicial system granted the prosecution office's request for preventative detention, issuing an arrest warrant. But before the authorities could detain him, Danillo had already left the country. Danillo entered Puerto Rico and had immediately obtained a fake ID before settling down in Chester County, Pennsylvania, where his sister lived. After finding out these horrifying secrets, Deborah had given him an ultimatum that if he didn't leave her and her family alone, she would expose his true identity. This, however, turned out to be a grave mistake. On the evening of April 18, 2021, Deborah returned home, and while she chatted with an elderly woman in front of her house, the children started playing catch-up. Suddenly, Danillo had showed up and requested Deborah to have a little chat with him. The elderly woman waited for her and witnessed an intense conversation unfolding between the pair. As the exchange got more heated, Danillo swiftly pulled out 2 knives from his pocket and stabbed Deborah. Her kids screamed at him not to touch their mother, but the man paid no attention and proceeded to savagely stab Deborah a total of 38 times before running away. The elderly woman immediately dialed 911 while Deborah's children ran to their neighbor's house, banging on their doors and screaming for help. When police and paramedics rushed to the scene, Deborah was immediately taken to the Paoli hospital, but she eventually passed away due to the severity of her injuries. Meanwhile, Danillo had fled Pennsylvania to avoid arrest. He was on the run for several hours before he was caught and arrested by the Virginia State Police. He was taken back to Pennsylvania, where he was placed under arrest and awaited trial. On August 16, 2023, Danillo Cavalcante's trial took place, and after just 15 minutes, was convicted of first-degree murder in the death of Deborah Brandao. During the trial, Deborah's children talked about the horrifying events that unfolded that evening, crying while they gave the details of the murder. Danillo was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and was taken to the Chester County Prison, where he was awaiting transfer to a federal prison. On August 31st, 2023, at around 9 a.m., Danillo had managed to escape the Chester County Prison through a chimney. He'd crawled up the wall between two cramped hallways near the exercise yard and climbed to the roof through the chimney. He then proceeded to cleverly cross the barbed wire fences that guarded the prison walls all around before escaping to prison. The CCTV captured the raw footage of Danillo Cavalcante escaping from jail and running away. According to the prison officials, there was another jailbreak a few months prior where a criminal named Igor Bolte had escaped from the jail, where he climbed to the roof in a similar manner and jumped to a less secure location before running off. He was, however, captured about a mile away from the jail a mere 5 minutes after his escape. This led to tightened security. The addition of the barbed wire fence and other security measures were addressed thoroughly to avoid another jailbreak. Despite the apparent bolstering of security, Warden Howard Holland commented on how the security officials had failed just as much as the physical infrastructure did to prevent another escape. Moreover, they also failed to realize that Danillo had been missing for over an hour after his escape.
While we believe the security measures we had in place were sufficient, they've proven otherwise. The tower officer did not observe nor report the escape. The escape was discovered as part of the inmate counts that occurs when inmates come in from the exercise yard. At 9:50 a.m., the prison was locked down and the special count was conducted. By 10:01 a.m., the public escape siren had sounded and the 911 center had been notified.
After the incident, the prison was shut down immediately, and the police had decided to broadcast the escape of Danillo Cavalcante all over the national news in order to warn the citizens.
How did a convicted killer simply walk free from a Pennsylvania prison? Apparently horizontally. That's what just released security video of Danillo Cavalcante's escape a week ago appears to show.
The police also released CCTV footage that captured Danillo running off to the woods after a few hours of his escape, about 2 miles away from the prison. The officers urged active participation from the citizens if they ever spotted this dangerous fugitive on the run. They'd also placed a reward of $10,000 for any information about the man. Alerts were sent out everywhere, and regular updates were shown in the news. Police also conducted regular searches in houses that were close to the area where Danillo had run off to after breaking out.
When I came home, the police was here, and they all came in. They did a sweep of the house, sweep of the yard, and then they let me in.
How scary has this whole thing been for you?
He has nothing to lose. That's what scares me the most.
More news about the possible sightings of the tall, black-haired man were broadcast on the TV channels. All of these developments kept the citizens on edge as a massive manhunt was officially launched to capture Danillo Cavalcante and bring him back to prison. The search perimeter had been expanded after almost a week had passed since the escape. About 250 officials joined the search for the fugitive. A CCTV camera captured Danillo for a brief moment at the Longwood Gardens, a botanical garden about 3 miles from the prison. Police and SWAT teams were immediately dispatched to the area.
Longwood Gardens is the last known credible sighting of convicted killer Danillo Cavalcante, who escaped from prison. This is now the 8th day of searching for him, and everything here feels as though they may be close. As we speak to state police, they say they believe he is still within their perimeter, and right now they are checking this location with all eyes trained on the area of Doe Run Road and Conservancy Road here in Kennett Square.
We have got somewhere north of 350, maybe close to 400 people working on this today.
The 9th day in the search for convicted killer Danillo Cavalcante, and we're getting an inside look at the headquarters in the operation to capture this escaped prisoner.
I know how stressful this is for the community. You want to know that there is a strong effort to capture him.
Working 12-hour shifts, state troopers, customs and border agents, and FBI agents are manning the phones, taking in tips and dispatching law enforcement accordingly. They're watching live camera feeds and taking in a stream of the helicopter's aerial view.
Searching for the escaped criminal among the uneven terrain and the hot weather proved difficult for the officials, but knowing that he might be close by, the perimeter was expanded once again after failing to spot and capture him at the Longwood Gardens. The officials increased from 250 to 400 as everyone was desperate to find this dangerous murderer.
There are an estimated 400 law enforcement personnel joining in the search for that escaped convict in Pennsylvania. He's now been on the run for 9 days. And some people are tired of waiting for them to get their man. As Stephen Fabian reports, regular citizens are now joining the hunt.
These guys are on a dangerous mission.
You go above the woods, brother. I'm going to go through the trails.
They're searching for the escaped murderer who has an entire county on edge.
I want this guy back in prison.
It's day 9 since convicted killer Danillo Cavalcante scaled a prison wall like a human crab, and he's still at large. Now, Ryan Stiles and his buddy Justin Davis say they are fed up with waiting.
Are you critical of the authorities because they haven't found this guy yet?
Yes, I mean, you watch the news and it seems like there's law enforcement everywhere, and not to bash them too much, I know they're out here, but it more seems like, and you ask a lot of residents around here, it more seems like they're just kind of sitting in their car, just kind of waiting for him to pop out. You really don't see that many boots on the ground.
They also believe they know the terrain better than law enforcement.
If I would ask them not to do it, I can't prevent them from doing it. But they have no authority and run the risk of, depending on what action they take, getting themselves in trouble.
They have no authority to tell me that I can't be out here. We all have the right to be out here, and if the reward's out there, citizens are going to chase it like myself.
Helicopters flying around the search area had tapes attached to it that played the recording of Danillo's mom crying and begging for him to surrender to the police. Schools and the public gathering places were forced to close down, and the police urged all people to lock their doors and windows and not stay out late at night or roam around alone in the daytime. Strict curfews were set as everyone held their breaths. On September 9th, Danillo broke through the search perimeter in Longwood Gardens, where he was spotted on the front porch of his former colleague's house near Phoenixville. Nearly 20 miles northeast of the search perimeter, he'd shaved himself and changed into new clothes to blend in as much as possible. He'd also stolen a dairy van that he used when he had to drive to his friend's place to search for food or clothes. The van, however, was later abandoned, but it had helped him go undetected when he asked for help from his friends. This made the search area increase once again, moving further north of Chester County, and the award money was increased to $20,000 for whomever had any information about Danillo. On September 11th, a 911 call was made by a local resident. He told the dispatcher that a man similar to the description of Danillo had broken inside the garage of his house and that he required immediate assistance. When the police had arrived at the location, the homeowner who made the call told him that he was forced to open fire with his pistol at Danillo in self-defense and shot him 7 times. But none of the bullets even touched Danillo, and he was able to escape. The owner also added that before fleeing, Danillo hurriedly grabbed a .22 caliber rifle with a scope and flashlight from his home. Armed with a rifle, the police advised everyone to lock all doors and stay inside their homes until he was caught.
Tonight, the search to find Danillo Cavalcante intensifying with a new threat to police in the community. The escaped killer now has a gun.
He is now armed with a .22 caliber rifle with a scope and flashlight mounted on it.
Nearby schools closed, alerts sent to residents.
Residents in the area are asked to continue to secure their homes and vehicles and remain vigilant.
On September 13th, at around 1 a.m., an aircraft with thermal imaging technologies spotted Danillo in the woods when an alarm went off after a heat signal was received. However, the police had to wait till the next morning since the weather was extremely harsh that particular night, and they didn't want to take any chances when it came to capturing this dangerous criminal. Around 8 a.m. the next day, police found Danillo sleeping in the densely covered wooded area with the rifle he'd stolen a few days earlier. When he saw the police approaching, he tried to escape by crawling into the thick undergrowth. However, he was unsuccessful when a police dog named Yoda grabbed him, biting onto his head and holding him in place until the police captured him. The officers claimed that it was just a minor head injury sustained from the bite and will not affect Danillo in any form. With that, Danillo Cavalcante was finally taken into custody.
Subject is in custody. Confirmed subject is in custody. You said the subject is in custody.
Yes! Today is a great day here in Chester County. Our nightmare is finally over and the good guys won.
Danillo was questioned immediately after being captured. He told the police that he'd survived on watermelons and creek water and only traveled at night to avoid being detected. His bigger plan was to steal a car and drive off to Canada, but unfortunately for him, the plan didn't succeed. On February 2, 2024, a district judge said that there was enough evidence presented to the county court for trial of all the charges against Danillo Cavalcante, including burglary, trespassing, and car theft. The capture of Danillo Cavalcante finally brought things back to normal for the citizens of Chester County. Family members and relatives mourned the death of a kind and loving soul, Deborah Brandao, who was ruthlessly stabbed to death by Danillo. Her friend Daniela Hernandez also spoke about how Danillo was extremely violent and aggressive during the time he and Deborah were together.
He was violent with Deborah. That's all I can say for, the relationship that they had. He did had some, 2 prior incidents of domestic violence against her. She had, but he was violent. And one of those days she came home because she was out with her sister and he bit her lip. And she bled a lot and had to run to the neighbors. He tried to lock her up and everything. And then the second time he actually grabbed a knife and said, "I'm gonna kill you."
In the aftermath of Danillo's grand escape, the tower officer of Chester County Prison was first placed on administrative leave and was later fired. The police thanked the community for their active participation in the massive manhunt that took place and assured that no other jailbreak will happen in the future from the Chester County Jail. Today's case was filled with a lot of ups and downs. The inhumanity of Danillo Cavalcante, who stabbed his girlfriend 38 times right in front of her children, shocked the whole nation. But when he successfully succeeded in escaping prison, everyone was on edge since they knew what this man was capable of. So now we ask you, do you think Deborah wouldn't have met with such a tragic end if she didn't tell Danillo that she would expose his earlier crimes? What do you think about his escape from the prison? And do you think the physical as well as the human resources were equally to be blamed for his escape? In Britain, after the Second World War, when the country was rebuilding itself, a series of mysterious disappearances began to surface that captured the nation's attention. These were unlike most missing persons cases. The victims were usually wealthy and influential people who disappeared without any trace. Families were left in despair, and the investigators had no clues to follow and no bodies to collect evidence from. Only fragments of remains were discovered. As it would turn out, what connected all these cases was a clear and sinister trend of manipulation. The man, who was later referred to as the acid bath murderer, planned his crimes well. In the end, the victims suffered a terrible end, and any signs of their lives were erased in a way that was as ingenious as it was sinister. During the investigation, the police realized that the acid bath murderer was not only a master of deception, but also very meticulous in concealing his misdeeds. His actions shocked the public and law enforcement alike, revealing a dark and unsettling chapter in Britain's post-war history. Our story begins with the disappearance of Mrs. Olive Duran Deacon, a 69-year-old widow from Kensington who was known for her charitable work. On February 18th, 1949, she left home to meet a man who wanted to discuss a business deal, and she disappeared without a trace. However, this was just the latest in a string of similar cases involving the disappearances of wealthy individuals. The first known victim was the successful businessman, Dr. William McSwan, who went missing in 1944. His sudden disappearance left his parents, Donald and Amy McSwan, devastated and bewildered. At first, they believed that he was probably concealing himself to avoid being enlisted during the war. However, when Donald and Amy themselves went missing in 1945, the mystery deepened even further. In 1948, another couple, Dr. Archibald Henderson and his wife Rosalie, disappeared in a similar manner after they met a man to discuss selling their home, but never returned. Their last known sighting was on February 12, 1948. Like the McSwans and Mrs. Duran Deacon, they too vanished without a trace. Although the cases occurred in different years and different places, the investigators quickly realized one horrifying link. All the victims had business with one man, and his name was John George Haigh. As detectives started linking these different incidents, they found themselves on the brink of one of Britain's most shocking criminal investigations. John George Haigh was born in the year of 1909 in Stamford, Lincolnshire. Born in a very religious family, his childhood was quite lonely and he was subjected to strict discipline. He excelled academically and had a natural talent for music. In his adult life, Haigh assumed a gentlemanly disposition that would enable him to move within the circles of the upper class in London. However, behind this facade was a man well versed in the art of deception. He rejected the idea of any power greater than himself, viewing himself as a sole master of his own fate. He had a sense of superiority that drove him to bully others. He had served several prison terms for theft, forgery, and fraud, which only helped him master his ability to elude the law. Haigh was released from prison in 1943 and relocated to London. He also set up a workshop in Crawley, Sussex. He was disguising himself as a successful businessman, and this isolated area was perfect for him to commit his gruesome acts. His fantasy of wealth without consequence turned deadly and was about to be exposed when Mrs. Olive Durand Deacon's disappearance caught the attention of the media. The disappearance of Mrs. Olive Durand Deacon on February the 18th, 1949, initially seemed like a typical missing persons case that captured Scotland Yard's attention. As mentioned before, Mrs. Durand Deacon was a charitable lady and was well known in society. Her mysterious disappearance after a meeting with John George Haigh raised many eyebrows. Soon, detectives learned that Mrs. Durand Deacon was not the first wealthy member of society to vanish after becoming acquainted with Haigh. The investigation went back to 1944 when a successful businessman, William McSwan, disappeared. Haigh, posing as an ambitious businessman who wanted to learn from McSwan, had been hired by McSwan as a driver and a personal assistant. While playing this role, he had an opportunity to learn a lot about the McSwan family. When William went missing, his parents, Donald and Amy McSwan, were heartbroken. They first believed that William could have absconded to avoid being enlisted into the army, and the police dismissed it as a voluntary disappearance. Haigh continued to communicate with the McSwans, sending them fake letters to maintain the illusion that William was still alive. As a result, his parents asked Haigh, who they believed was their son's trusted assistant, where their son could be, not knowing that it was Haigh who had been sending them the letters all along. It was then that Haigh claimed he knew where William was hiding. Haigh lured them into his workshop in Crawley, Sussex, under the pretense of allowing them to see their son. Inside, he killed them both with a single gunshot to the head. He then poured sulfuric acid on their bodies and disposed of the remains. Haigh then sold the properties and assets of the McSwans by presenting himself as William and forging documents. The McSwan case revealed Haigh's method. He would charm his victims, lure them, kill them, and then dissolve their bodies. His growing confidence led him to refine his approach, but it also increased his mistakes. In 1948, Haigh had become a more professional criminal, and his next target was Dr. Archibald Henderson and his wife Rosalie. He befriended the Hendersons after learning they were planning to sell their house. Posing as a potential buyer, he ingratiated himself with the couple, all with the intention of gaining their trust. On February 12, 1948, he invited Dr. Henderson to his workshop to complete the sale. There, he shot Henderson and later tricked Rosalie into coming to the workshop under the same guise, only to kill her as well. Haigh disposed of their bodies in the same horrific manner, acid baths in large metal barrels. He sold all the properties they owned, including the house and the car, by presenting false documents. Around this time, Haigh began to have doubts about his method of dissolving bodies in acid. The acid effectively dissolved most of the remains, but it failed to dissolve everything. However, the vanishing of Mrs. Olive Durand Deacon in 1949 put Haigh in the limelight. Eyewitnesses were able to identify Haigh as the last person known to be with her, and his nonchalant attitude during the initial police interviews raised suspicion. Unlike his other victims, whose disappearance went largely unnoticed, Mrs. Durand Deacon had wealthy connections, making her absence impossible to explain away easily. Detectives, led by Inspector Albert Webb, decided to investigate Haigh more thoroughly. His alibi was weak, and soon contradictions started emerging. During the investigation of the case, it was revealed that Haigh was not the successful businessman he portrayed himself to be, but a fraudster. The investigation led them to Haigh's workshop in Crawley, Sussex, a seemingly ordinary place that hid dark secrets. On February 28, 1949, the authorities went to Haigh's workshop with a search warrant. At first glance, the place didn't raise any suspicion, but upon closer inspection, there were several large metal barrels and bottles of sulfuric acid, which were considered highly dangerous. The barrels smelled of chemicals, and when the lids were opened, they contained a blackish liquid. The contents were then examined by forensic experts, and what they discovered was not only shocking, but truly horrifying. Inside the barrels were human remains, fragments of bones, gallstones, and dentures. It was clear that the workshop was not just a place of business, but a dumping ground for Haigh's victims. Forensic analysis identified dentures belonging to Mrs. Olive Duran Deacon, linking Haigh directly to her murder. Personal items such as handbags and scraps of clothing also pointed to the identities of other victims. Haigh's belief that acid could erase all evidence was shattered by these findings. As the evidence accumulated, Haigh was arrested on February 28, 1949. In the first interrogation, he was calm, and even when asked about the disappearances, he was quick to deny any involvement. But as the forensic evidence came in, Haigh's carefully constructed facade began to crack. Realizing that there was no way to explain away the evidence against him, he admitted to the murders in graphic detail. Haigh described how he tricked each of his victims into visiting his workshop, where he shot them and then disposed of their bodies by dissolving them in acid. His confessions were calm and composed, and he didn't even look remorseful for what he'd done. Haigh's accounts of his criminal activities were clinical, almost as if he was discussing a business deal and not the cold-blooded murder of several people. He detailed his process: gaining the trust of the victim, then shooting his victim, most often in the head, and then using sulfuric acid to get rid of the body. His indifference and his plain narrations of the events were something that the detectives present would not soon forget. He had no respect for people as human beings, but thought of them as objects to be used for his own selfish ends. On July 18, 1949, John George Haigh's trial began at Lewes Assizes, attracting significant media attention. The courtroom was packed, and the atmosphere was tense as Mr. Justice Humphreys presided over the proceedings. Haigh's defense was funded through a deal with the News of the World, which provided financial support for his legal representation in exchange for exclusive access to his story. This arrangement added a layer of controversy to an already high-profile case. In the defense, Edward Marsh argued that Haigh was insane and therefore should not be held legally responsible for the crime. They pointed to Haigh's bizarre dreams where he imagined himself as a Christ-like figure, believing he could cleanse others of their sins through blood. This twisted belief in the power of blood not only troubled his dreams, but also became his warped justification for the horrific crimes he committed in real life. However, this defense soon crumbled. The leading psychiatrist, Dr. Henry Yellowlees, stated that Haigh was in full control of his actions and understood the consequences that would follow. Yellowlees said that Haigh was a paranoid egocentrist who had more of a problem than insanity. The prosecution, led by Sir Hartley Shawcross, presented a precise case which showed that Haigh's murders were premeditated and calculated. They contended that the human remains and the items of property that were found in Haigh's workshop were enough to convict him. This proved that Haigh was not a man with a screw loose, but a cold-blooded killer who planned his murders meticulously. His own utterances about the crimes he committed, how he planned them, and how he tried to conceal them were instrumental in establishing his sanity and premeditation. During the trial, Haigh's demeanor remained notably detached. He showed little emotion, even as the harrowing details of his crimes were presented. The court heard about the meticulous planning involved in each murder and the disturbing precision with which Haigh executed his crimes. The evidence against him was overwhelming, painting a clear picture of a man who had taken the lives of multiple people without any sense of remorse or empathy. After just 15 minutes of deliberation, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict. The jury found Haigh guilty on all counts. When asked if he had anything to say, Haigh said, "No, nothing at all." Mr. Justice Humphreys passed the death sentence on him by ordering that he be hanged until dead. Haigh's reaction to the sentence was clinical and unemotional, as he had been throughout the trial. John George Haigh was hanged at Wandsworth Prison on the 10th of August in 1949. His last hours were characterized by composure and serenity that was in sharp variance with the gruesome acts he committed. The execution was a means to an end, but it also had a lasting effect on the people involved. Barbara Stevens, Haigh's former fiancée, was deeply affected by the revelations of his actions. She struggled to reconcile the man she once knew with the monster he'd become. Haigh insisted that he never intended to harm her, but the reality was that she could have easily become one of his victims if circumstances had been different. The story of John George Haigh is one of calculated cruelty and the relentless pursuit of justice. His crime shocked Britain and left an indelible mark on the field of criminal investigation. As the country moved forward, the Haigh case became a crucial study in understanding the mind of a serial killer and the measures needed to prevent such crimes. The memory of the victims and the lessons learned from the investigation continue to shape criminology and forensic science today.
My wife is dead. I just came home, and she's in the bedroom, and she's been stabbed. Oh my God. Oh my God.
On February 24th, 1992, the town of Big Lake, Minnesota was jolted by a chilling crime. The police received a harrowing 911 call from Charlie Jensen reporting the murder of his wife, Linda Jensen. Linda, a vibrant and outgoing mother of 3, had been viciously killed in her home. The violence of the attack was evident, as Linda had been stabbed multiple times with such force that it seemed as if the perpetrator aimed to take revenge. Her lifeless body was discovered along with a knife from her own kitchen, and there were no signs of forced entry or struggle.
The victim had been stabbed multiple times in the chest area.
It looked like somebody had tried to carve her heart right from her body.
The crime scene was remarkably clean of fingerprints or blood samples, which made the investigation a daunting task. As the search for Linda's killer commenced, the case appeared to stall, but a new lead would soon provide a crucial breakthrough, setting the stage for the revelation of an unexpected killer.
I've got this inkling in my stomach. Can you check out this person?
When I walked out of that house, I said to myself, my God, he did this.
His rage, his obsession just consumed him.
How could someone commit such a horrific, violent attack and continue to live among us for another 8 years?
On February 24th, 1992, the police were informed of a homicide in Big Lake Township around 4:18 p.m. Lieutenant Eric Thompson immediately passed the bad news to his team, thus setting the investigation in motion, which would soon reveal a sinister plot. Upon arrival at the Jensen residence, officers were met with a disturbing sight. Linda Jensen was discovered in her bedroom, lying on her back at the foot of the bed with a comforter over her body and a large kitchen knife that pinned the comforter to the floor.
When I entered the scene, I entered the bedroom, saw the victim lying at the foot of the bed face up, ascertained obviously that that person was dead.
She was naked. She had a comforter over her body with a large knife pinning the comforter to her body, having been stabbed right through her chest. The victim had been stabbed not just once, multiple times in the chest area.
The knife had been thrust into her chest several times that showed a crime of passion, implying premeditated intent. The crime scene was particularly shocking for the officers as well. The overkill that was used in the murder of Linda was something that had not been seen before.
I thought it was a horrific overkill with the knife.
It looked like somebody had tried to carve her heart right from her body.
My theory was the perpetrator was really angry with the individual, and that's why he had stabbed her in such a heinous way.
The weapon used in the attack was a knife taken from the butcher block in the Jensen kitchen, making the crime more personal and heinous. Investigators noted that the house was somewhat messy, but there were no signs of forced entry or obvious disturbance. The absence of fingerprints and blood samples complicated the case even further. With no immediate leads or physical evidence, the investigators knew they were going to face significant challenges.
We wanted to solve this case as quickly as possible. They no longer have a mother or a spouse, and it was a very, very tragic case indeed.
However, the investigators soon uncovered a more horrific truth. The circumstances Linda endured before her death were deeply shocking. Further examination revealed that Linda was physically assaulted and beaten several times before death. While examining the circumstances surrounding her death, investigators became convinced that someone close to Linda was responsible for the attack. As a result, they shifted their focus to her personal life, seeking to uncover any clues that might reveal the truth. Born in 1952 in Minneapolis, Linda Jensen was a vibrant soul, full of energy and love. She married her high school sweetheart, Charlie, and together they had 3 children, Andrew, Joey, and Lisa. Despite their strong bond, their relationship faced significant challenges due to Charlie's alcoholism, leading them to separate in 1978. However, this wasn't the end for them, and they remarried in 1990, embracing new beginnings. The couple recommitted themselves to each other and moved to Big Lake, Minnesota. Linda's life seemed to be on the right path as she embraced her role as mother and wife, unaware that a tragedy was about to shatter her world. When the investigation began, the detectives finally focused their attention on Linda's husband, Charlie Jensen.
Usually in an investigation, especially a homicide investigation, you usually look at the person closest to the victim.
Since Charlie and his wife had had a volatile relationship in the past, the circumstances that had led to the crime made him a suspect. The investigators then interrogated Charlie.
Charlie appeared very upset about the situation, but he was coherent and he was able to give us information.
He'd appeared visibly concerned, but was well composed and provided a detailed account of his activities on the day of Linda's murder. He'd gone to work early in the morning around 6:15 a.m. while Linda was at home taking care of their infant, Lisa. Their son, Joey, who was 9 years old, had gone to school at around 7:45 a.m. in the morning. When Charlie tried to reach Linda around 9:45 a.m. and again at around noon, there was no answer, due to which he got worried. When Charlie returned home at around 4:05 p.m., he realized that the house was in disarray. Joey was back from school and busy with his homework, while Lisa was in her playpen, still dressed in the same clothes from the morning. This struck Charlie as unusual, knowing Linda would never leave the baby in the same outfit all day. Concerned, he began searching for his wife. Charlie's search took him to the bedroom where he found Linda lying dead on the floor. The discovery left him in a state of shock. His testimony initially seemed credible, but then soon police discovered something unusual that raised suspicions about him. They also discovered that Charlie had handled the knife that was recovered from the crime scene, but he denied using it.
That would be an immediate red flag. That would have caused investigators to focus right on Charlie.
Although this revelation was initially shocking, it didn't warrant the immediate attention of the man as the main suspect. Charlie appeared to have a connection to the case, but the investigators faced a significant challenge: his alibi. If his alibi proved to be valid, it would clear him as a suspect. They began by reviewing his work attendance records, which ultimately confirmed that Charlie was being truthful. However, the detectives felt it was essential to investigate further, as spousal involvement is often a critical factor in such cases. Concerned about the potential volatile nature of Charlie and Linda's relationship, they also opted to administer a polygraph test to ensure a thorough investigation. But the test also revealed his credibility of his statement.
Charlie indicated that they had a good relationship. The only reason that the marriage broke up was simply because of his drinking.
Before Linda and Charlie got married, the first marriage, Charlie got sent to Vietnam. What he went through in Vietnam always stayed with him, and he got into heavy drinking because of that.
He drank incessantly. It caused a lot of problems in the marriage. So eventually, by 1978, Linda sought a divorce. Charlie was also asked to do a polygraph test, which he did. He passed the polygraph test and was eliminated as a suspect.
Everything he said was down to the wire. He could not have been the perpetrator in this crime based on the timeline.
Since Charlie could not have been the murderer, the attention was turned to other possible suspects. The murder had caused a stir in the community and instilled a sense of fear in people as the police went around looking for evidence.
This crime was a shock to the community. It was a smaller community and, they didn't have many homicides. To think that somebody is still out there walking the street and you don't know who, what would be worse?
At last, a witness stepped into the light and was ready to reveal something that offered a new lead to the investigation.
The investigative team got a call from a rural mail carrier who had claimed that she had been by the Jensen house on the day of the homicide.
The mail carrier arrived at the house at around 11:30 that morning, and she said at the time she saw a man in a pickup truck pulling out of the driveway, and she said she got a pretty good description of the man.
The postal worker described the truck as an older truck. I believe it was tan, two-tone tan, and it was occupied by a Caucasian male, late 30s, early 40s, kind of a scruffy guy with a beard.
We had a sketch artist that was involved in trying to recreate the picture of that person that the mail carrier supposedly saw.
The sheriff's office did release that sketch to the media, and it was widely publicized.
Based on this, the authorities began their search using a sketch made as per the witness's description. Police interviewed the local residents, hoping that someone might have seen the truck or the man described by the mail carrier. They interviewed several of Linda's neighbors, including Kent Jones, who stated that he'd seen a similar truck but didn't know the driver. The investigation appeared to slow down as the police were unable to identify any suspects from the community policing. The focus then shifted to Linda's past boyfriends. She'd been in a relationship with Robert Bob Beard after her divorce with Charlie. They had a son named Joey, and the couple broke up after about 4 years of being together.
Bob Beard really didn't see much of Joey and was really not a father figure, and, he never paid child support.
He had given up custody, but Bob Beard had repeatedly been trying to get more visitation, and sometimes he wouldn't see the kid but once or twice a year, and he was really upset about it.
Charlie told the investigators that Beard had been calling Linda frequently in the days before her death, saying that he wanted to spend more time with Joey. This revelation was enough to make Beard a person of interest. He might know something about the events that had occurred with Linda.
The individual that perpetrated this crime was angry at her about something.
Bob Beard was an absolute ideal suspect. During the investigation, we learned that Linda had been with the guy, and he was kind of a bad actor. According to the family, Linda was concerned about Bob due to his anger issues and the fact that he was drinking and using drugs.
However, Beard denied any involvement in Linda's murder, claiming that he was alone at home on the day of the murder. He didn't own a car, so he couldn't visit Linda's home that night. His defense seemed strong already, and there was no concrete evidence that could implicate him in the crime scene. Beard's decision to consult a lawyer only heightened the detective's suspicions. They'd been gathering information for weeks, piecing together a puzzle that could reveal something. Yet, despite their gut feelings, they couldn't find anything concrete to arrest him on. After Beard was ruled out as a suspect, the priority shifted to John Silliman, Linda's ex-husband from her second marriage.
According to Charlie, after Linda left Robert Beard, she met an individual by the name of John Solomon.
When I first met John Silliman, I didn't like him. He just kind of acted like he was God's gift to women, but that's who she, really cared about, and she did marry him in '86.
Linda had married Silliman in 1986, and he'd followed her to California. Their relationship became worse as Silliman became abusive to her, and Linda decided to return to Minnesota. Silliman was annoyed by Linda's child support claims and the fact that she was pregnant with another man's child. But his alibi put him in California at the time of Linda's murder, and his employers supported his claim. While Silliman did have a motive and had been abusive, he had an alibi, and yet again, there was no evidence to suggest that he'd hired someone to commit the murder. As the case dragged on with no clues and no suspects, the investigators faced a crushing setback. Each day without progress felt like a heavy weight, and soon the investigation went cold, leaving them frustrated and desperate for answers.
You know, I've worked a lot of homicides, but we had nothing going except here we have this woman who's deceased, been a homicide victim.
It's like, who could have done this? You know, I wanted justice for Linda.
The silence of the case loomed over them, but they didn't lose hope to find her murderer. In 1999, hope was reignited when Sheriff Anderson decided to reopen the case. The department decided to announce a reward for any new information that might help break the case. This move was a last-ditch effort to spark public interest and encourage anyone with knowledge to come forward. Meanwhile, the detectives revisited the case files and went through every detail again, including the DNA collected during the initial investigation. They hoped that, with fresh eyes, they might uncover a clue that had been overlooked. The techniques in DNA analysis had since improved significantly, and therefore the investigators decided to test the DNA found at the crime scene with those of Linda's former partners and run it through a sex offender DNA database. However, the result was a shocking revelation.
Investigators took between 80 and 85 DNA samples for testing, and they ruled everybody out. All of the men that she had been involved with in consensual relationships had been eliminated as possible suspects in the homicide.
The DNA test did not yield any positive results, and all the tested individuals were cleared from any suspicion. However, surprisingly, the investigation did get a boost in the year 2000 from an unlikely source, hinting at secrets buried deep within the case that would soon be revealed.
Angela called the sheriff's office and said, "Hey, I've got this inkling in my stomach and I've had it for years. Can you check out this person?"
That was the first lead the police had in over 8 years.
She called in that little piece that we needed. We've been wanting for over 8 years. That broke the case wide open.
Angela Hennon, an ex-friend of Kent Jones, called the sheriff's department to report the information she had. Hennon had been associated with Kent Jones soon after the murder of Linda and had observed that Jones had been lying about knowing Linda. Earlier, Jones had stated that he'd never met Linda, but had later stated that he'd seen her jogging around his neighborhood. This new information led to further investigation on Jones. Jones, who was a neighbor, had previously been ruled out as a suspect. However, the revelation of his dishonesty about knowing Linda raised new suspicions. Detectives discovered that Jones had been lying, and they shifted their attention to him as a suspect.
As an investigator hearing that type of a story, I would think that he has some involvement. There's something that is not right and needs to be followed up further.
Jones was called in for an interrogation. He maintained his innocence, asserting that he had nothing to do with Linda's murder, sticking to his defense. Despite his attempts to distance himself from the crime, his body language and the inconsistencies in his story raised red flags for the detectives. They tried to link him with Linda and probe into his financial dealings, but couldn't get any evidence against him. Despite this, Jones was not an innocent individual. The police discovered his criminal record, including a prior involvement in an insurance fraud case.
Mr. Jones had a lot of skeletons in his closet. Outwardly, he seemed like a family man, and inwardly, he had a very, very dark side to him. He had a criminal history. He rented a storage locker that one night caught on fire. Mr. Jones entered a claim to the insurance company, and as it turned out, he probably had about $35,000 worth of items in that locker and not several hundreds of thousands that he claimed. It was an overclaim, and he was subsequently investigated and charged with defrauding the insurance company.
This revelation highlighted his propensity for dishonesty. More investigation revealed even more sinister aspects of Jones's life. Police later found out that there were previous accusations of domestic violence.
There'd been some suspicion that he'd been abusive with his wife in the past.
I read a report that Mrs. Jones had been stabbed.
She apparently slipped and fell onto the open dishwasher, and her body was pierced by a knife that had been put into the dishwasher handle down. And I think some people looked at that and wondered, did that really happen that way? That just doesn't make sense.
Investigators were very suspicious about those circumstances. She, however, stuck to that story and never pursued any charges against her husband.
If Mr. Jones was the person that stabbed her, this is in line with the same thing that happened to Linda Jensen, in that she was stabbed, and it shows that he has the propensity for violence.
With these revelations, detectives began to speculate that Kent Jones could be involved in the murder of Linda Jensen. First, Jones has stated that he'd never met Jensen, but when confronted with contradictions in his testimony, Jones testified that Linda used to pass jog his residence and they'd occasionally exchange words. But when asked about an affair or any physical intimacy with Linda, Jones became very aggressive and was unwilling to provide a DNA sample to clear his name of suspicion.
After 8 years of investigation, he was the first person to refuse to provide a DNA sample voluntarily. That, of course, raised another huge red flag.
When I walked out of that house, I said to myself, my God, he did this. I had such a strong feeling, but it's not evidence.
Officers went to the local district court judge and applied for a search warrant in order to obtain a DNA sample from Mr. Jones.
His refusal to provide a DNA sample was suspicious, and his unwillingness to cooperate suggested he was hiding something, and that added to the detectives' worries. Therefore, police officers sought a warrant to take a swab from Jones in order to get his DNA. As tensions grew and the detectives waited nervously for the results, a sense of dread filled the room. When the results finally came in, they were both surprising and exactly what the police had feared. They had found their killer.
Mr. Jones's sample of DNA was sent to the crime lab, and within a short period of time, we got the results back and the DNA matched.
It was a match on almost every level. There was no question that the DNA at the crime scene came from Mr. Jones.
This breakthrough proved his direct complicity in the crime, which formed the basis of the charges against him.
I knew this son of did it, so I wanted him gone.
Kent Jones was arrested and charged with first-degree murder on July 25, 2000. However, Jones remained adamant and insisted that he was not guilty even when the DNA evidence was presented. His trial, which began on May 31, 2001, focused on three main charges: first-degree murder, second-degree intentional murder, and criminal conduct in the first degree. The DNA was crucial as it placed him directly at the scene of the crime. The trial was rather dramatic, and the jury was given a detailed description of the events that occurred and the history of Jones. In a twist of events, Kent Jones testified that he'd been in an affair with Linda Jensen and the physical relation between them was consensual. This unexpected defense claimed that the DNA discovered on Jensen was as a result of this alleged affair and not of a violent act. This revelation left the courtroom in shock, and Linda Jensen's family was furious and upset. The allegation that Jones was seeking to slander Linda only served to increase the intensity of the trial. Even though Jones's testimony was quite shocking, the jury had no other choice but to make a decision based on the evidence. The DNA match and the ugly details of the past of Jones made the jury unanimously come to a conclusion. On December 8, 2001, Kent Jones was convicted on all three charges. He was later sentenced to life imprisonment. But the fight for justice was not over yet. The Minnesota Supreme Court stepped in and acquitted Jones's conviction. The defense successfully convinced the court to permit the presentation of evidence related to another suspect, which opened the possibility for a retrial. The case against Jones was back in court for a second time in November 2006. The drama was far from over yet, as Jones introduced a new angle to his defense.
After Mr. Jones's conviction, he did file an appeal that went directly to the Minnesota Supreme Court. Mr. Jones and his attorneys wanted to present evidence of an alternative perpetrator, and the Supreme Court agreed with the defense, overturned the conviction, and resulted in us having to retry the case a second time.
He accused Charlie Jensen, Linda's husband, of being the real murderer. Jones said that he had an affair with Linda and stated that on the morning of the murder, he'd slept with her. According to Jones, when Charlie had found out about the affair, he became furious and killed Linda.
Each time he changed his story from I don't know her to, oh yeah, I knew her because she jogged by my house, to, wait, we did meet once to talk about Boy Scouts, to, we had a consensual affair. It wasn't laughable, it was just sad.
The prosecution was quick to dismiss this assertion, since Charlie had an alibi that couldn't be shaken and that had been confirmed by several people.
I think after all of that, there was a great sense of relief from the family that, you know what, we don't believe this. Thank God the jury didn't believe it either, and this guy is actually going to get what we've been looking for now for years.
During the trial, Kent Jones's claims became more and more outlandish. This only fueled more speculations that the case could take ages to be solved, which would make the process of seeking justice even more challenging. The strategy of the prosecution was to return to the essence of the crime and the reasons that stood behind it. According to the prosecution's theory, Kent Jones was a very dangerous man. They explained that Jones had become fixated with Linda Jensen in a rather unhealthy manner. It had been gradually escalating, and he'd seen Linda around his house. This fixation, along with the understanding that Linda was alone with an infant, became the cause of his impulsive and violent behavior. As for the day of the murder, Jones's intention was to come to Linda's house to talk to her. But it's thought that Linda turned him down, and this led to a fight of some sort. The passion of the obsessed Jones boiled his blood, and he became a raving lunatic and attacked her. He raped Linda, choked her, and then proceeded to stab her several times before using a comforter to cover her. The crime scene was typical of a person who had gone out of their senses, which was in line with the severe beating that Linda had received. The prosecution claimed that Jones's violent actions were due to his anger and jealousy that was out of control and due to his obsession. In the second trial, Kent Jones was again convicted of the murder of Linda Jensen by the jury after a very intense trial. The verdict was a great relief to Linda's family and her loved ones. Once again, Jones was sentenced to life imprisonment, which, in a way, put a stop to the long suffering of the victim.
I believe Mr. Jones went over there to visit with her, talk to her, try to induce her into perhaps having sex with him.
He probably got rejected, he got furious, and this was his moment, and he took it out on her.
For the investigators, it was a hard-earned victory after a challenging and emotional investigation. The successful conviction of Kent Jones in the retrial provided both professional satisfaction and personal closure, delivering justice for Linda and her family. After enduring a lengthy legal battle, the Jensen family finally felt that justice had been served, honoring Linda's memory and acknowledging their suffering.
Tell me it's not her. Whoever did that to her ought to be ashamed.
Angela's family and friends are inconsolable. Detective Flynn makes the arrest on the spot when Outlaw shows up for day 2 of the search party.
I put the first handcuff on him and he immediately tried to take off running, and I had to actually physically tackle Mr. Outlaw to the ground and place him into handcuffs.
On the night of Friday, March 28, 2014, Angella Rabotte, a popular model, dedicated dancer, and loving mother to a 3-year-old, attended a lively party with her friends in Atlanta, Georgia. The evening was meant to be a joyful escape. Instead, it soon turned into a nightmare. The following morning, Angela was reported missing under mysterious circumstances, leaving her family and friends in distress and confusion.
We're all hysterically upset. Even without confirmation, we all know. He escorted me over there, and they had a chaplain, and you already know what they're going to tell you. So I don't hear the words anymore. And I just lean on my daughter and crying.
As the search progressed, every lead seemed to intensify the mystery. But soon, the investigation took a chilling turn. On March 29, 2014, Angela failed to reach her home, and the babysitter began to worry. Angela hadn't even checked in on her daughter, Shay, which was unusual for her. Sensing that something was off, the babysitter reached out to Angela's mother, Judea Rabotte, hoping she might have more information. When Judea received the call, she understood something terrible had happened. She knew her daughter well. Even if something had been wrong, Angela would never have ignored her responsibilities as a mother. Frantically, Judea tried to reach Angela through calls and texts, but there was no response. Realizing time was of the essence, she gathered Angela's friends to form a search party. They couldn't wait for the police, and they needed to find Angela. However, this search didn't yield any fruitful results. Soon, the police also started an investigation to search for any clues regarding Angela's disappearance. In 2014, Atlanta, Georgia was emerging as a vibrant hub for the entertainment industry. Among the rising stars in this bustling city was 26-year-old Angella Rabotte. With her stunning looks and commitment to her work, Angela had started appearing on magazine covers and modeling for book covers. However, her glamorous life came with challenges, particularly as a devoted mother to a 3-year-old daughter, Shay. Despite her glamorous career, Angela's personal life was filled with worries, especially regarding her complicated relationship with Shay's father, Daryl Campbell. Despite their challenges, Angela was determined to be the best mother she could be. She worked hard to balance her feelings for Daryl with her responsibility as a parent, always putting Shay first.
They did not work out good as a couple. They definitely would have their moments. I don't know that I would say that their relationship was contentious, but they both had their tempers.
On a chilly spring evening of March 28, 2014, Angela took a decision that would ultimately change everything. After ensuring Shay was safely dropped off at a trusted babysitter's house, Angela prepared for a private party at an upscale hotel in Midtown Atlanta. The allure of the night was too strong to resist. Events like these could get dancers thousands of dollars, an opportunity that was hard to come by. Angela's friend picked her up and they drove to the venue. Angela danced and socialized with the attendees. Eventually, the party moved from the hotel to a private residence north of the city. Caught up in the excitement, Angela decided to join them and spend the whole night there, unaware of the events that the next morning would bring. Detective Colin Flynn from Gwinnett County quickly began investigating Angela's disappearance and suspected her ex-boyfriend, Daryl Campbell, who was also the father of Angela's 3-year-old daughter. Daryl's noticeable absence from the search party raised suspicion. The authorities decided to speak to him, and it was during this conversation that Daryl agreed to appear on national television for his first interview.
She said, "Your baby mother's missing, where's your daughter?" And so I was like, what do you mean? And she said, "It's missing posters made up on Facebook." I didn't drive. I didn't have a car at the time. They didn't tell me that they were going to search. They were just telling me that we're all meeting up here, and it wasn't like an organized search through the detectives or anything like that.
He explained that he'd been unaware of Angela's disappearance at first, but learned about it through social media posts 2 days after the incident. Daryl initially didn't take the situation seriously, as the search party was unorganized. However, as the days went by, he felt Angela's absence more acutely and began to realize the gravity of the situation. Daryl remembered Angela as a devoted mother who would never leave her daughter in such a way. Worried about Angela, Daryl wanted to join the search efforts, but lacked transportation. He decided to wait a few days, hoping for more information. Eventually, he met Charlie Outlaw, a friend of Angela, and also the last known person to have seen her on March 29, 2014, according to her friends, but this individual provided no answers. Daryl sensed that Charlie held crucial information that could aid the investigation, which had begun to shock the community. As the investigation continued, authorities decided to interview Charlie. He confirmed that he'd met Angela on March 29, 2014. During the interview, Charlie revealed that Angela had called him and asked for a ride back to her hometown after the private party at a residence north of Atlantic City. Everything seemed to go smoothly until Charlie expressed his frustration over always having to drive her around. Their conversation escalated into an argument. Meanwhile, Angela was chatting with someone else on her phone, claiming she had other options for rides. The situation grew tense as their verbal exchanges intensified. Ultimately, Charlie decided to visit his girlfriend's house to pick up some forgotten belongings. He asked Angela to wait in the car, but upon returning from the apartment, he discovered that she had vanished. This revelation alarmed the police, as the location where Charlie parked his car near his girlfriend's house had numerous buildings and roadways, presenting many opportunities for something to have happened to Angela. Angela was last seen in the parking lot of Steeplechase Apartments on Singleton Road in unincorporated Norcross near Charlie's girlfriend's apartment. Charlie's involvement in the search for Angela, coupled with the fact that he was the last person known to be with her, raised significant concerns, and Charlie became the prime suspect in the investigation. The authorities felt strongly that he was concealing something, but they needed more concrete evidence to make an arrest. As the investigation progressed, they delved deeper into Charlie's background and his relationship with Angela. They spoke with Angela's friends to gather more context about her life and her interactions with Charlie. Angela first met Charlie Outlaw through mutual friends when they were around 15 years old. They spent much of their teenage years together. Some friends later told authorities that as Angela gained popularity, Charlie attempted to pursue a romantic relationship with her. However, Angela didn't share the same feelings and decided to keep their relationship strictly as friends. Charlie also tried to convince Angela to let him be her manager, but she refused, leading to several arguments between them. Despite these tensions, they eventually reconciled and continued their friendship. As the investigation into Angela's disappearance progressed, authorities began to uncover disturbing information about Charlie's background. He was a convicted felon who had served time for drug trafficking and armed robbery. Initially, the police found no concrete evidence linking him to Angela's case. However, a breakthrough emerged when one of Charlie's friends informed the police that they'd witnessed him cleaning out a rental car the day after Angela disappeared. This was the same car Charlie had used to pick up Angela on the night she went missing. The police found this behavior suspicious, questioning why he felt the need to thoroughly clean a rental car so soon after Angela's disappearance. But they needed to gather more evidence against him, so the investigation continued until they made a crucial breakthrough. On April 3, 2014, 6 days after Angela had disappeared, her body was discovered by city surveyors near Arcado Road and Lilburn Industrial Way. She had been shot in the back of the head. The gunshot wound was determined to be the cause of her death. The devastating news of Angela's death left her family heartbroken and desperate for justice. The discovery was even more shocking when authorities realized that the location where her body was found was just 5 miles away from where Charlie had parked the car when he was last seen with Angela. Meanwhile, the authorities grew more convinced of Charlie's involvement in her murder. They secured the rental car he'd used and made a critical discovery. There were bullet marks inside the vehicle, and gunshot residue was found on the interior roof. This evidence suggested that a gun had been fired inside the car, further implicating Charlie in Angela's death. As the investigation closed in on him, the police uncovered more damning evidence. They discovered a recorded phone call that Charlie had made to his girlfriend, who was in jail, shortly after Angela's disappearance.
I've been going through a lot of that's been happening on the daily. It's a lot that like you're not even understanding because you don't know about that I'm dealing with.
The recording clearly indicated that Charlie was hiding something from the authorities, adding to the mounting suspicion against him. Despite this, the police knew that obtaining a direct confession from Charlie would be challenging. They needed solid proof to arrest him, and while they were gathering evidence, he continued to elude direct charges related to Angela's death. However, on April 1st, 2014, Charlie Outlaw was arrested on unrelated drug charges, giving the authorities the opportunity to bring him in for questioning about the above evidence. The authorities recognized that this might be their best opportunity to secure a confession from him. Determined not to let it slip away, they devised a plan to elicit more information from him. They arranged for Charlie to meet with his girlfriend, who had recently been released from jail, in a bar. Unbeknownst to him, his girlfriend was wearing a wire to record their conversation. Charlie, however, was wary of being recorded and was cautious not to incriminate himself verbally. He avoided speaking directly about the incident, but instead relied on nonverbal communication using actions. During the conversation, he took long pauses and used actions to tell his girlfriend about what had transpired on the night of Angela's death. In a chilling revelation, Charlie conveyed that Angela, known for her strong and tough demeanor, had pulled out a handgun she kept for protection during an argument while they were driving. Though Charlie didn't believe Angela intended to use the weapon, he managed to wrestle it from her. He then placed the gun at the back of her head, and according to him, it just went off. This statement, though unspoken, was consistent with what investigators had already suspected. The medical examiner had determined that Angela's wound was a contact execution-style gunshot, making it highly unlikely that the gun simply discharged accidentally. Although the gun was never recovered, the wound's small caliber matched the description of the weapon Angela's friends knew her to carry for protection. Despite Charlie's attempts to avoid detection, his girlfriend emerged from the conversation with detailed knowledge about Angela's death, details that had never been released to the public. She knew exactly how the wound was located on the back of her head and where she'd been shot. Charlie also mentioned his surprise at the lack of blood, which was consistent with the type of wound Angela had suffered. He described how, after being shot, Angela slowly slumped forward, a description that perfectly aligned with the medical examiner's findings. Though Charlie had attempted to mask his confession by acting out the crime rather than speaking it aloud, his efforts were in vain. The information his girlfriend relayed to the authorities provided them with the crucial evidence they needed, further solidifying Charlie's involvement in Angela's death. The meticulous planning by the authorities to gather this evidence brought them one step closer to justice for Angela. On Thursday, July 10, 2014, Charlie Outlaw was served with arrest warrants related to Angela's disappearance and subsequent murder. Determined to uncover the full truth, the authorities continued to interview witnesses and gather additional evidence, strengthening their case. In the course of their investigation, the police made a significant discovery in August 2016. They found a pair of gloves in Charlie's apartment that were stained with Angela's blood. This evidence, along with the other findings, provided crucial support for the prosecution's case against him. Charlie Outlaw's trial began in August 2016, but it ended abruptly in a mistrial due to a critical mistake made by the prosecution when they mistakenly played footage of Charlie, which was related to his drug charges. The defense successfully argued that Charlie would not receive a fair trial due to this error, and the judge agreed, resulting in the decision to start over with a new trial. This setback was frustrating for Angela's family and friends, who were eager to see justice served. However, the authorities remained resolute in their pursuit of the truth. The second trial commenced in January 2017. This time, Charlie made a surprising decision. He chose to plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter. In his confession, he admitted that he had accidentally shot Angela during an argument in his car. He claimed that he panicked after the shooting and decided to dispose of her body in the woods, hoping to cover up the crime. During the trial, Charlie expressed remorse for his actions and apologized to Angela's family, stating that he never intended to kill her, but acknowledged that his reckless behavior had led to her death. Despite his plea and apology, the gravity of Charlie's actions could not be overlooked. The court sentenced him to life without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 15 years in a Georgia state prison for his role in Angela's killing. While the sentence brought some measure of justice, it did little to ease the pain and sorrow felt by Angela's loved ones. Her family and friends were devastated by the loss of a beloved daughter, mother, and friend.
He murdered my daughter, and he can spend the rest of his life in prison for it. How can somebody take such a beautiful life? How can you do that? From all the friends, the family that loved her, because Angie could always make you smile, no matter what. And he robbed us all of that.
The thing I miss most about Angela is her being able to be a mom to our daughter.
As the legal proceedings concluded, the community reflected on the tragedy that had unfolded. Angella Rabotte was remembered as a vibrant, strong, and loving individual who had been taken too soon. Her legacy lived on in the hearts of those who knew and loved her, and her memory inspired many to work towards ending violence and supporting those affected by it. Angella Rabotte will forever be remembered as a beloved mother, daughter, and friend.
Hi, I'm Luke. I'm the friend. They're just
Right, okay. Right, are you with the patient now?
They are there.
Right, okay.
They're like, they're stiff.
You're saying there, so just to confirm, how many people are hurt?
Sorry, I can't hear you. Well,
how many people require help, just to confirm?
Two. I have to do one.
So I need to come outside. It's their daughter, you can hear. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So I'm organising help you now. Just stay on the phone with me.
On April 9th, 2023, the peaceful Mersey Island in Essex, England, was shattered by a horrifying incident. Police received a call reporting 2 individuals locked inside a house, motionless and unresponsive. Upon arriving at the scene, the police discovered the couple Stephen and Carol Baxter, aged 61 and 64, both deceased. The shocking discovery left the quiet island baffled and bewildered. It was Luke DeWitt, the Baxters' neighbor, who made an emergency call. He'd been close to the elderly couple and had no idea what could have happened to them. DeWitt described how Carol's health had been declining day by day, and she relied solely on an online doctor, faithfully following the prescriptions provided by this unknown entity.
There was no bloody murder scene. There was no obvious murder weapon. But Carol and Stephen's deaths were cold and calculated murders.
There were no signs of violence or forced entry, nor any evidence suggesting that the couple's death were self-inflicted. So what caused Stephen and Carol Baxter to die? Could the involvement of this unknown doctor have played a role in this tragic event? It all began with Ellie Baxter, the Baxters' daughter, who grew more and more worried after numerous failed attempts to call her parents, Stephen and Carol, who lived far away. On Easter Sunday morning, April 9th, 2023, Ellie decided to visit their home on Mersey Island, hoping for any sign of them. When she arrived, she was alarmed to find the house locked from the inside. Despite calling out and trying to contact them, there was no response, which was unusual for a holiday weekend. Ellie even noticed that the blinds were still down, unchanged since her last visit, and she became even more concerned. Therefore, she decided to check around the back of the house, and when she peered in through a window, she saw Stephen and Carol seated in armchairs, motionless and unresponsive. Deeply alarmed, Ellie immediately called Luke DeWitt, a 34-year-old computer science graduate and an old resident of Churchfields, West Mersey. He was a trusted family friend who lived nearby, and Ellie knew he would respond quickly in such an emergency. Within minutes, DeWitt arrived at Baxter's home, being a close neighbor. He found Ellie in a distraught state, crying loudly and desperate for assistance. DeWitt acted quickly. He took Ellie's phone and placed an emergency call, understanding that she was too overwhelmed to handle the situation herself. As a caring and responsible neighbor, DeWitt informed the authorities, detailing the urgent nature of the situation. Police took immediate action and arrived at the scene soon after. When the police arrived, they promptly began their investigation and took testimony from DeWitt. During his conversation with the police, DeWitt also mentioned that he'd last seen Stephen and Carol on Friday, April 7th, 2023, at their home to discuss Stephen's business. Stephen ran a small company which specialized in bathroom accessories and was best known for its curved bath mats designed for floors. DeWitt had helped them create the website for their business, which is how their friendship began. Since Carol's health was deteriorating, she couldn't assist much with the business, so DeWitt occasionally stepped in to help them.
Friday, I got home just before 8, so that's when I left. Mm-hmm. And me and Steve were just talking about work and the business. Carol can't work anymore. Yeah. Last year, she's not been able to do anything.
Okay.
My mum's sister. So we're just having a chat, but he didn't really feel up to it and just asked me to go. So
that's fair enough.
I was going to come back tomorrow and
just check on them again.
To the gym, and I'm used to checking on. I always pop in because they wanted this weekend, Easter weekend.
Just left them to it.
So with me, I was out with those two last night. I took them to dinner for Eddie's birthday, and Steve's mum, Irene, who lives in London, was worried that she wasn't answering her calls either. Right, so blind to down, and the light was on.
And you thought,
they're doing what they want. They've got their weekend. Lights are on. They're just ignoring us. All cool.
Okay.
Just giving this. They're in the chairs. They're moving. You're not replying. So I literally ran from home to here to come check.
Okay.
And just as I got here, they just smashed the back window to get in.
Okay, fair enough.
He further explained his close relationship with the Baxter family. Since their daughter, Ellie, lived far away, DeWitt often took care of Stephen and Carol. Carol suffered from Hashimoto's disease, which gradually destroyed her thyroid gland, causing symptoms like fatigue and memory loss. These issues worried Ellie, but she felt reassured knowing that DeWitt was always there for her parents. It was clear that DeWitt had pure intentions towards them and also took care of Carol on a daily basis. He told the police that he regularly accompanied Carol to the gym and ensured she took her prescribed medication from Dr. Andrea Bowden, whom she had met online. Dr. Andrea had also suggested some herbal medicines and smoothies to boost her energy, which DeWitt made for her daily.
And have you seen them today? Did you go in to see them yourself?
I have been in there, yeah. And I went upstairs. The paramedic asked me to get all Carol's medication that she's got a look. Because sometimes she'll have various things over the years or various operations she's had. So I went upstairs and got anything that I thought looked like a tablet drawer downstairs and put it in a brown box. I don't know if any of it's valid, but I know Carol.
That's right. Yeah, they like to know what people take. Gives them an idea of what they suffer.
You don't know what she's
actually taken.
Because quite often she might take. She has every morning levothyroxine. But sometimes she forgets that she could take it 6 or 7 times. I know that's
really
that, but I mean, she doesn't know.
She doesn't know she's taken it loads of times.
No.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
When police asked if he had met with the couple on the day of the incident, on the 9th of April 2023, DeWitt explained that he'd gone upstairs to leave some medication, but didn't notice anything unusual because the stairs to the upper floors were built outside, so he never entered the bottom floor. He never suspected that something terrible could have happened to Stephen and Carol. During their conversation with DeWitt, the police found nothing unusual. They saw him as a great helper to the Baxter family, and their follow-up with DeWitt ended there. However, when the police investigated further and spoke with Baxter's daughter, Ellie Baxter, she shared her suspicions of the circumstances on the day of the incident. Initially, when she looked through the window and saw her parents, she suspected that there might have been a carbon monoxide leak. Therefore, she'd thrown open the doors and windows to air out the house. In her panic, she decided to call DeWitt first because, like her parents, she trusted him deeply. Ellie also mentioned that her parents, Stephen and Carol, had no enemies and were always helpful to others. Police took Ellie's testimony into account and started to investigate further. Initially, when the police entered into the house, they also suspected carbon monoxide poisoning as the cause of Stephen and Carol's deaths. However, this theory was soon ruled out.
When police entered the home, initial thoughts were that this could possibly be a carbon monoxide incident where it's obviously really unusual that 2 people would be found deceased at the same time. Initial investigation showed that that was unlikely to be the case. We then needed to send off toxicology after post-mortems to understand how Carol and Stephen had died. And it was when those toxicology reports came back that showed that they both had fatal doses of fentanyl in their system.
When their bodies were sent for toxicology tests, the results revealed that Stephen and Carol had been poisoned with high doses of fentanyl, which had been mixed into their morning tea. Additionally, the pathologist found that Carol had also been poisoned daily with high doses of promethazine, an over-the-counter medicine often used as a sleep aid. This new information led the police to suspect Dr. Andrea, with whom Carol had been in contact online regarding her health. This was also something mentioned by DeWitt during his conversation with the police. Consequently, the police began their search to find Dr. Andrea to determine if she had any connection to the case. Without any delay, the police launched a murder investigation. Their prime suspect was Dr. Andrea Bowden, who claimed to live in America. But after an extensive search, the police found no trace of her. It was almost as if she'd vanished. The only evidence they uncovered was a series of email conversations between her and Carol Baxter, but there was no clue to her real identity, leading to a perplexing case. During the investigation, the police found that Stephen and Carol Baxter had planned several times to meet Dr. Andrea Bowden in person, but she never followed through, leaving them hanging. This added to the mystery surrounding Dr. Andrea's true identity. What was the real identity of Dr. Andrea Bowden? While police were busy searching for Dr. Andrea Bowden, Ellie Baxter found a crucial clue in the case. She found a will inside the house in which Baxter mentioned that all benefits of his business would be entitled to DeWitt, who would become the controller and director of their business. Ellie was so shocked at that moment that she decided to inform the police. When Ellie presented this new information to the authorities, the case took a turn and DeWitt became the focus of the investigation. Detectives conducted a thorough search and uncovered new evidence. CCTV footage from Friday, April 7, 2023, when DeWitt last saw the couple alive. The footage clearly showed that he was standing in front of the house, looking anxious and stressed, repeatedly checking his phone. The investigators also found that on the same day, £6,000 were transferred to DeWitt from Stephen's company account. DeWitt had unknowingly become the prime focus in the case. With this new information, investigators took immediate action and thoroughly searched DeWitt's house for any leads. During the search, a breakthrough emerged when officers found packets of used and unused fentanyl patches, the same substance used to poison Stephen and Carol Baxter. Additionally, they discovered a bag of medical tacks and pill casings. Authorities believe that these pills had previously been given by DeWitt to Carol Baxter, who had once been admitted to the hospital in February 2022 and was found to have tacks in her stomach, according to the information they received during the investigation. This new evidence raised many questions about DeWitt's intentions towards the Baxter family. As a result, the authorities finally arrested DeWitt and took him in for interrogation, which led to a shocking revelation that nobody could have imagined, especially Ellie Baxter, who had placed her faith in him. When authorities questioned DeWitt about the fentanyl patches found in his house, he explained that his father was a cancer patient and had been prescribed these drugs to relieve his pain. Unfortunately, his father passed away in 2021, and DeWitt had forgotten to return the drugs to the pharmacy. This explanation seemed reasonable, but the truth was soon uncovered. When the police searched DeWitt's phone, they found disturbing images of Stephen and Carol Baxter sitting motionless in armchairs, exactly as Ellie Baxter had discovered them. These images were taken before their bodies were found. Additionally, the police discovered an app called iHeartCam installed on DeWitt's phone. Through this app, he'd been monitoring the Baxters' activities by secretly installing cameras in their home without their knowledge. The police also discovered that when DeWitt was last seen in front of Stephen and Carol Baxter's house, he was actually monitoring their deaths through the iHeart app on his phone. Moreover, he drew £6,000 from Carol's bank account, as mentioned before. This was the moment the police realized that DeWitt had a direct connection to the case, and they knew that there was more to uncover. However, the identity of Dr. Andrea Bowden, the first suspect in the case, remained a mystery. Could Dr. Andrea Bowden somehow be connected to DeWitt? The mystery was resolved when the authorities made a shocking breakthrough and uncovered the true identity of the unknown doctor. Upon further investigation, the police discovered the device DeWitt used to create a fake persona to communicate with Carol Baxter. One of these fake personas was Dr. Andrea Bowden. It became clear that DeWitt used this fake identity to poison Carol daily. Additionally, he used 20 fake personas to manipulate and deceive the entire Baxter family, including Ellie Baxter.
He created over 20 personas, and some of these were a doctor in America who used to communicate with Carol and Stephen about illnesses that they had. Carol's behaviour became erratic because we now know that she was being poisoned on a regular basis. And these personas he used to control Carol and Stephen Baxter into believing that they were ill, and ultimately were used on the final day, we believe, that led to their death. So one of the personas that DeWitt created was a doctor in America, and this doctor would have conversations with Carol about the illnesses she had and would give her advice. The doctor even introduced other patients to Carol, and all of these people were personas that DeWitt had created himself in order to maintain that control.
Rather than Dr. Andrea Bowden, DeWitt used another fake persona named Cheryl. During his testimony, DeWitt explained that Cheryl was someone Carol often spoke to and trusted. He used this persona to manipulate Carol emotionally. In addition, DeWitt created another fake persona named Jenny, who was Cheryl's sister. He used Jenny to connect with Ellie Baxter, pretending to be a theater producer and encouraging her to pursue a career as a vocalist. When law enforcement examined DeWitt's phone, they found voice recordings of him practicing as Jenny to communicate with Carol.
It's Jenny. It's Jenny. Hi, Carol. It's Jenny. It's Cheryl's sister.
Yes, oh, it's so nice to finally speak to you after all these messages we've been doing.
Even after Ellie's parents died, DeWitt sent text messages pretending to be Jenny to console her. This chilling discovery revealed the extent of DeWitt's deception. During his confession, DeWitt tried to defend himself by claiming that Stephen Baxter was also involved in this plan to deceive Carol Baxter. He explained that Stephen was directing the scheme to make Carol believe she was receiving help for her mental and physical well-being. However, this was soon ruled out when the police found no evidence supporting Stephen's involvement. The police had everything they needed to take DeWitt to trial: fentanyl patches found in DeWitt's home, CCTV footage, and proof of those fake personas he created. Finally, DeWitt went to trial in February 2024 at Chelmsford Crown Court. He arrived in a wheelchair, claiming it was necessary due to an injury on one of his legs. However, he denied the prosecution access to his medical records and provided no scans or evidence of any injury. The prosecution argued that he was faking the illness to gain sympathy from the jury. The court also heard that DeWitt had not been seen in a hospital for years. Despite these claims, the prosecutor persevered, and an almost 6-week trial began at Chelmsford Crown Court. On Wednesday, March 20th, 2024, a jury unanimously convicted DeWitt for the murders of Carol and Stephen Baxter. DeWitt received a life sentence with a requirement to serve at least 37 years in prison. This sentence is one of the most significant ever secured following an Essex police investigation.
My name's Detective Superintendent Rob Kirby, Head of Major Crime for Essex Police. I can now say what we at Essex Police have believed for some time, that Luke DeWitt is a cold and calculated murderer. He would befriend people and purport to be an upstanding, helpful and kind member of the community. The reality is far more sinister. DeWitt went to great lengths to cover up his tracks. He deceived everyone who knew him, who welcomed him into their family homes, and who relied upon him for help, or at least what they believed was help. Those lies and that deception continued in the evidence he gave in court.
Detective Inspector Lydia George, who led the investigation into the murders, called DeWitt a pathological liar. After the sentencing, George emphasized that the day was not about Luke DeWitt or the Essex Police.
Today, Luke DeWitt has been given a life sentence and will serve a minimum of 37 years in jail. However, it is simply impossible to put a number on the lives of Carol and Stephen. They were loving, generous parents, and they touched lives of many. They are entering a period in their lives where they should have been able to enjoy precious time with their grandchildren. They should have been planning holidays, looking forward to spending Christmases with family and living their lives to the full. Luke DeWitt took all that away in April 2023. He tried to cover it up. He went to great lengths to blame others who we know were not involved in any way. He clearly enjoyed the control he exerted over people, especially Carol and Stephen. Ultimately, the only person in this world who knows why he did this is Luke DeWitt, and he has proven time and time again to be a manipulator. What we do know is the significant sentence handed down is entirely fitting for the pathological liar that he is. For almost a year, we have been determined to secure justice in its entirety, and today marks the conclusion of one of the most complex investigations undertaken at Essex Police. 37 years in prison is a significant time, and there will not come a point where he will have spent more than his life in jail than not. Today, though, it's not about Luke DeWitt. It's about Carol, Stephen, and it's about their family. We know nothing will bring Carol and Stephen back. We know nothing can give the family back their loving mother, sister and grandmother, or their generous father, brother and grandfather. However, I truly hope this sentence is of some comfort to the family.
Instead, she focused on Carol and Stephen and their grieving family. George acknowledged the irreparable loss of Stephen and Carol and the deep sorrow felt by their loved ones. She expressed hope that the sentence would bring some comfort to the family as they move forward. George's main focus was to honor the memory of Carol and Stephen and recognize the pain their family's going through. The justice served was seen as a step towards providing some solace to those left behind. The case had finally been solved, leaving the family in a state of deep sorrow. The loss of Carol and Stephen is unimaginable, leaving a void in the hearts of their loved ones and the community that can never be filled. Despite this, it's hoped that the sentence brings some measure of comfort to the family as they move